Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the last hours of someone's life. Someone history called a witch. You'll feel the creak of the wooden door, the chill that seeps in from stone streets, and maybe, if you're not careful, the prickle of someone's breath at your ear. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you and what's your local time right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You jolt awake because someone is pounding on the door. Not the polite tap of a neighbor asking for salt, but a hard, hollow knock that makes the wood groan. The kind that tells you the person outside has no interest in being invited in nicely. The night air is cold enough that you can feel it pressing through the cracks. Your breath hangs in the dim candlelight, trembling slightly, as if it too is afraid. The second knock is louder. This time, it's followed by a voice, deep and flat. By order of the magistrate, open up. There's no mistake who they are. The dark robes, the glint of a halberd steel, the way their shadows stretch across your small room before you even unlatch the door. These are the town watch, and they're not here for a chat about the weather. Your bare feet press against the cool dirt floor as you rise. The boards creak under you. Every sound is magnified in this quiet. You tell yourself you haven't done anything wrong, but your mind races anyway. Because in 15th century Europe, wrong is whatever the crowd fears this week. Historians still argue whether most witch trials were driven by actual belief in sorcery or by convenient excuses to settle old grudges. Either way, once the accusation is spoken aloud, it's like ash in the wind. You can't catch it again. When you open the door, two men stand there. One is older, with a beard threaded with gray, eyes fixed just above your head, never quite meeting your gaze. The other is young, too young to have grown so used to wearing a weapon on his hip. He holds a small lantern, its light flickering over his cheekbones, making him look both stern and nervous. You see the way his jaw tightens as he says your name. The paper in his hand rustles as he reads, your name again. Suspicion of witchcraft. The words sound ridiculous in your own ears like a bad jest, but they sit heavy in the cold air between you. You think of the tales you've heard, of midwives accused after a child's fever, of widows taken away after a cow fell ill. It's almost funny, in that dark, teeth-gritting way, that a rumor and an unlucky turn of events are all it takes. They step into your home without asking. The older one glances at your shelves, your herbs hanging to dry. He picks up a bundle of dried lavender as if it's evidence. You want to say it's for the bath water to help you sleep, but you don't bother. You've heard enough stories to know explanations don't count. In fact, they can make you sound guiltier. The young one produces a length of rope. It's not coarse. It's the kind used for binding parcels, not livestock. You note this small mercy. He ties your wrists with practiced motions, though he avoids pulling too tight. You wonder if this is kindness or just efficiency. A cold gust slips through the doorway as they usher you outside. You glance back into your home. The faint warmth of the fire, the unwashed mug on the table, the faint smell of rosemary, knowing you may never see it again. The night seems darker than it should, the sky a deep slate without a single star showing. Somewhere in the distance, A dog barks once and then falls silent, as if it too senses what's happening. You start down the street between them, your shadow stretching and breaking over the uneven stones. In the silence, you recall something you once overheard in the marketplace. In Germany, the baker's wife had whispered, they drown them in barrels to see if they float. You'd laughed at the absurdity, not realizing you might one day be part of the same conversation. The truth is, different towns invent their own ways of proving guilt, and no two methods are the same. The only thing consistent is that passing the test is usually the worst thing you can do, because it means you're dead. The younger guard clears his throat. It's just procedure, he mutters, almost to himself. You don't answer? Somewhere inside, you've begun that quiet, stubborn refusal to give them more of you than they've already taken. The houses along the street are dark, but you know there are eyes peeking from shutters. A shadow moves here, a curtain shifts there. Fear is contagious, and so is curiosity. And in this moment, you are both the infected and the spectacle. By the time you reach the end of the street, your toes are numb from the chill. The lantern light wavers over the cobblestones, and you hear the distant gurgle of the river. You know what lies ahead. The magistrate's building, the damp holding cells beneath, and the endless questions that will never have the right answers. Somewhere deep down, you start counting your heartbeats, as though they might be your last measure of time. You shuffle along the narrow lane, each stone under your bare feet a little reminder that the world can hurt in small, quiet ways before it hurts in big, final ones. The street opens up into a wider thoroughfare, if you can call it that, flanked by crooked timber houses leaning toward each other like old gossips trading secrets over your head. The moon is nowhere to be seen tonight, which is just as well. If it were shining, you might see more faces peeking from windows. Your wrists ache from the rope, but you don't bother to twist them, not yet. You're not thinking about escape, at least not in any real sense. But you are measuring the guard's steps, the rhythm of their breathing. Call it instinct or paranoia. Historians still argue whether most accused witches accepted their fate quietly or resisted with every chance they got. The truth is probably messier because people are messy. A light drizzle begins, soft enough to almost feel kind at first. It beads on your hair and runs in tiny rivers down your cheeks, mixing with the salt of your skin. The younger guard adjusts his lantern, shielding the flame with his palm. You catch a glimpse of his face in that moment, young, tired, but also curious, as though he's trying to work out whether you matched the stories. You pass a baker's shop with its shutters drawn tight. You know the man inside. He's sold you bread for years. You imagine him crouched behind the counter now, hoping not to be noticed by the very woman he's seen every Thursday morning. People do strange things to distance themselves from danger. In a way, you can't blame them. The street narrows again, hemmed in by buildings so close you can touch both sides with your elbows if your hands weren't tied. The air here is heavier, carrying the smell of wet stone and something metallic. Probably the blacksmith's shop up ahead. Sparks sometimes spill from its open door, dancing like fireflies in the night air. Not tonight, though. Tonight, it's silent, cold, shuttered tight. You remember, oddly, a story your grandmother once told you about how in Venice they would seal an accused witch in a small wooden box and drop it into the lagoon. If the tide claimed her, she was innocent. If she survived, she was guilty. You'd asked her, even as a child, how that could possibly make sense. She just patted your head and said, "It's not about sense, little one. It's about fear." You didn't understand it then, but now the words settle in your chest like a stone. The drizzle turns into proper rain, and the stones beneath you grow slick. The older guard slows slightly, careful not to slip. He still hasn't looked you in the eye, and you begin to wonder if it's shame or habit that keeps his gaze fixed elsewhere. You want to ask him if he believes the charge against you, but your tongue stays still. The sound of the river grows louder with each step. You know the magistrate's building sits just beyond the bridge, a squat, square thing of gray stone, older than anyone living. They say it was built before the town even had walls, back when these lands were just clusters of huts and stubborn people trying to make something of them. Some believe the basement was once a wine cellar. Others insist it was always meant to be a prison. Historians still argue over its true origin, as if that changes what it is now. The bridge itself is narrow, its planks slick underfoot. You glance down at the black water rushing below, thick with the reflection of torchlight. For a moment, you picture yourself breaking free, diving in, letting the current carry you into the dark. The thought is ridiculous. Your hands are bound, the water is icy, and the guards are close enough to grab you before you take a step. Still, the image lingers, stubborn as a weed. Halfway across, you spot the magistrate's lanterns glowing in the mist ahead. The building looms, its door framed by heavy iron hinges and a carved lintel bearing the town's crest. It would almost look grand, if not for the mud-slick steps and the faint smell of mold that always seems to cling to it. The older guard finally speaks, his voice low, almost reluctant. "Watch your step," he mutters as they guide you toward the entrance. It's a strange thing to say to someone you're delivering to a cell, but you nod anyway. Inside, the air is warmer but stale, carrying the scent of damp paper and tallow candles. The floor is worn smooth by years of boots shuffling across it. A clerk sits at a desk near the door, quill scratching steadily across parchment. He doesn't look up until the guards say your name, and when he does, his expression is as flat as the paper in front of him. Just another entry in a long list. You're led past him, down a narrow hallway lined with heavy wooden doors. Somewhere behind one of them, a voice mutters something you can't quite make out. Another door rattles against its hinges as someone inside shifts against the wood. Your bare feet slap softly against the stone now, the sound echoing faintly in the tight space. The hallway turns sharply and ends at a flight of stairs descending into darkness. A draft rises from below, carrying the unmistakable smell of wet earth and iron. The younger guard's lantern is the only light as they lead you down, step by step, into the bowels of the building. You can feel the temperature dropping, the damp clinging to your skin. When you reach the bottom, you see it. A row of cells carved into the stone, their bars thick and dark with age. Some stand empty, their floors littered with straw gone gray from time. Others hold shapes huddled against the walls, too still to tell if they're asleep or just lost in thought. Your cell is at the far end. The rope comes off your wrists, and for a moment the skin tingles with relief. The younger guard doesn't meet your eyes as he closes the door. The older one locks it with a final hollow click. The sound rings in your ears long after they've gone, leaving only the drip of water somewhere in the darkness. You sit on the cold stone bench, knees drawn up, and listen to your own breathing. The cell smells of damp straw and old fear. You realize that you've been brought here not just to await judgment, but to start thinking about what judgment will mean. The first thing you notice about the cell isn't the cold. It's the way the darkness feels heavier here, as if it's been gathering for years. The air is thick with damp, and the smell is layered: old straw, mildew, and something faintly metallic that makes you think of rust or blood. You sit on the narrow stone bench along one wall, running your fingers over the uneven surface. Centuries of prisoners have probably traced the same grooves, though you doubt they've found much comfort in it. Water drips somewhere beyond the bars, the steady plink, plink, plink acting as a clock with no mercy. You lose track of how long you've been sitting there before the first sound of movement reaches you. The scuff of a boot, the faint jangle of keys. You glance up to see a figure lingering just outside the pool of lantern light. It's the younger guard. He's holding something wrapped in a scrap of linen, and after a quick glance over his shoulder, he steps closer. "Bread," he says simply, sliding it through the bars. You take it without a word. It's coarse, a little stale, but the warmth from his hand still clings to it. "Do you really?" He doesn't finish the sentence. Maybe he's not sure he wants the answer. You take a bite instead of replying, chewing slowly, buying yourself time. He leans closer, lowering his voice. "They say you cursed old Marta's cow, that you kept the milk from turning." You swallow. "I've never touched her cow." "I didn't think so." His tone is strange, half relief, half worry. But people believe what they're told, easier than thinking for themselves. It's an oddly modern sentiment for someone living in an age where belief could be sharpened into a weapon. Historians still argue whether ordinary townsfolk genuinely feared witches or just used the fear to explain bad luck. Either way, it works the same. Someone suffers, and the rest feels safer for a while. He steps back when the older guard's voice echoes down the corridor. "Leave her," the man calls, and the younger one gives you a brief, almost apologetic look before disappearing into the shadows. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders, though the gesture is more habit than warmth. Your fingers brush over the small tear in the fabric near the hem, and suddenly you're remembering the day it happened. Snagged on a nail while you carried firewood home. You'd laughed about it then. It's strange how a memory so small can feel sharper than the fear you're supposed to be drowning in. The door at the far end of the corridor opens with a long creak, and a man in dark robes steps inside. His presence seems to draw the air out of the room. He carries a ledger tucked under one arm, and in his other hand, a taper candle that throws his gaunt face into sharp relief. His eyes settle on you with a mix of curiosity and calculation. "Name," he says, though you know he already has it written down. You give it anyway. The scratch of his quill follows immediately, each stroke deliberate. "Occupation," you tell him, and his brows twitch just slightly at the mention of herbs. You can see the thought forming behind his eyes. Herbalist, healer, midwife, all too close to the kind of woman they're looking for. The belief that witches used plants for spells wasn't just folklore. It was reinforced by fear of women who held knowledge outside the church's control. He asks about your family, your neighbors, whether you've traveled. The questions come like pebbles dropped into a pond, each one sending ripples you can't quite follow. At one point, he asks if you've ever been visited in the night by a familiar spirit. You almost laugh, because what does he think? That a black cat whispered secrets to you? But you keep your expression neutral. When he's satisfied, or maybe just bored, he closes the ledger and steps away, his candlelight shrinking with each footstep until it's swallowed by darkness. The cell feels heavier without it. Hours, or maybe minutes, pass before a sound breaks the stillness. A voice, low and hoarse, drifts from the cell across the corridor. First time, you lean forward, peering into the shadows, but can only make out a shape hunched in the straw. Yes, you answer cautiously. They'll ask again tomorrow, the voice says. Different questions, same answers. Doesn't matter. There's no malice in the tone, just a weary certainty. What happens if I tell them what they want to hear? You ask. The shape chuckles, the sound dry as leaves. Then they'll thank you and hang you quicker. Saves them the cost of keeping you alive. You lean back, the straw rustling under you. Somewhere above, a door slams. The voices fade, and you're left with only the dripping water again. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. Your mother's hands, calloused yet gentle, weaving nettles into cord. The smell of wild thyme on a summer morning, the way the river looked in spring, swollen and glittering under the sun. You try to hold on to these small things because they are yours, and nothing, not even this damp hole in the earth, can strip them away. But the truth is, the cell is already starting to do its work. It isn't the cold or the darkness that wears you down. It's the waiting, the slow erosion of time until you can't remember where you end and the silence begins. You wake to the sound of footsteps above you, slow, deliberate, and too heavy to belong to a rat. The air in the cell feels thicker than before, as though the damp has settled deeper into your lungs overnight. Your back aches from the stone bench, your knees stiff from being curled up against the cold. The light that filters down the stairwell is gray and weak, a dawn that promises no warmth. You rub your eyes, but your hands still smell faintly of the rope from last night. You can almost feel its fibers pressing into your skin again, a phantom itch that won't leave. The footsteps stop, and then the younger guard appears holding a small wooden bucket and a tin cup. Water, he says, sliding the bucket inside the bars. Don't drink too fast. His voice is softer this morning, but there's still that flicker of curiosity in his eyes. You nod and lift the cup. The water is cold enough to make your teeth ache, but it washes away the sour taste in your mouth. You glance at him over the rim of the cup. What will happen today? He hesitates. They'll call you before the council. You'll answer their questions. Again, you don't need to ask what happens if your answers don't please them. In truth, you already know. Historians still argue whether such councils were ever truly intended to find the truth, or if they were always a slow walk toward a foregone conclusion. Before you can say more, the older guard's voice echoes from above, and the younger one straightens. Time, he says, almost apologetically, and moves away. The clink of keys, the heavy thud of boots on stone, and then your door swings open. The older guard gestures for you to follow. You rise, joints protesting, and step into the corridor. Your bare feet are instantly chilled by the damp flagstones. They lead you up the narrow stairs, the lantern light bouncing against the walls. The magistrate's chamber is brighter than you expect, sunlight slanting through high, narrow windows. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. At the far end of the long table sits the magistrate himself, broad-shouldered, his white hair cropped short, and his eyes the pale blue of winter ice. On either side of him, two council members in dark robes shuffle papers and whisper to each other. Behind them, shelves sag with heavy leather-bound books, their spines cracked from years of being thumbed for the same passages. You're guided to a small stool in the center of the room. It's low enough that you have to look up at them, which you suspect is the point. The magistrate begins without preamble. Do you deny the accusation of witchcraft? You answer simply, yes. He leans back slightly. And yet, 3 witnesses say you've cursed their livestock, blighted their crops, and spoken with spirits. His voice is steady, not accusing so much as announcing. The first witness is called Old Marta herself. Her shawl is wrapped tight around her shoulders, and she keeps her gaze fixed somewhere just above your head. She tells the council about the night her cow's milk turned sour and how she saw you in her field the next morning. You know the truth. You were passing on your way to gather water, your bucket swinging in your hand. But as she speaks, the memory is already being rewritten in the minds of the men before you. The second witness, a fisherman, claims you called up the wind during a storm that wrecked half the docks. The absurdity of it almost makes you laugh. You who have trouble even coaxing a fire to stay lit on damp days. But the council members nod gravely, as if the details fit neatly into a puzzle they've already assembled. The third witness is harder to look at. It's a girl no more than 12 who says she saw you whispering to a black cat under the full moon. You remember the animal, mangy, hungry, and mewling in the alley. You'd given it the scrap of bread from your pocket. Now that small kindness is another nail in the coffin they're building for you. One of the council members asks about the herbs hanging in your home. For healing, you say? He raises a brow. Or for hexing? The question is a trap, of course. Either answer feeds suspicion. You settle on silence, which earns a murmur from the spectators gathered along the wall. They press on, asking if you've ever felt unnatural strength or visions of the future. You tell them no, but the words feel useless in this room. Historians still argue whether councils like this truly believed they were defending their towns, or if it was just a theater of righteousness to keep the crowd satisfied. The questioning ends not with a verdict, but with the magistrate's curt nod. She will remain in custody until further inquiry. The gavel strikes the table, a sound like a coffin lid closing. The guards lead you back down the stairs. As you pass through the corridor, you catch glimpses of the other prisoners, faces pale in the dim light, eyes that follow you until you disappear into your cell again. The younger guard lingers just long enough to set another scrap of bread on the bench. He doesn't speak this time, but the gesture says enough. You sit, bread in hand, listening to the water drip. The questions still echo in your head, reshaped and sharpened, ready to be asked again tomorrow. The voices from the council chamber fade quickly, replaced once more by the damp quiet of the cell. You sit with your knees pulled close, gnawing at the scrap of bread. It's dry, the kind that leaves a film on your tongue, but hunger dulls your judgment, and soon the peace is gone. A sliver of light falls across the floor, not from the stairwell this time, but from a small window high in the wall. More of a slit than a window, really, and too narrow for even a child to squeeze through. Dust motes drift lazily in the beam, looking almost golden compared to the gray stone around you. You lean your head back against the wall and close your eyes, listening for any sign of life beyond your cell. Somewhere down the corridor, someone coughs, a deep, rattling sound that suggests they've been here longer than you. Another voice mutters, too low to understand. The scrape of boots interrupts the quiet. This time, the older guard appears first, a small bundle of straw tucked under his arm. Without a word, he opens the door, dumps the straw in the corner, and steps back. The straw smells faintly of mold, but it's softer than the stone bench, so you drag it into a rough pile and sit on it. Not long after, the younger guard returns, this time with a bucket of water and a smaller pail for washing. He sets them down just outside the bars and leans in slightly. "You shouldn't make them think you're stubborn," he says quietly. "I'm not stubborn," you reply. "I'm telling the truth." He looks away. "Doesn't matter. They don't want truth. They want a confession. You think of something your mother once told you. The moment they decide you're guilty, they'll collect proof like flowers in a basket. It doesn't matter if they're weeds." Historians still argue whether confessions in these trials were ever considered reliable, but it hardly matters when the verdict is already written. After he leaves, you pace the narrow space of your cell, 5 steps from wall to bars and back again. The rhythm is strangely calming, though it also makes the room feel even smaller. Your thoughts drift to the witnesses from this morning. Marta, with her tight shawl and sharper tongue, the fisherman spinning storms into curses, the little girl with the black cat. You try to imagine what they see when they look at you, an ordinary woman or the monster they've been told to fear. The sound of footsteps draws near again, but these are slower, accompanied by the faint creak of leather. A man you haven't seen before appears, a clerk, judging by the ink stains on his fingers. He carries a thin wooden board and a sheet of parchment. "The magistrate requests your statement in writing," he says, his voice clipped and official. You take the quill he offers. The feather is worn, the nib frayed, and the ink smells sharp and bitter. You write your name, the date, and then the truth as plainly as you can. No curses, no spirits, no dealings with the devil. Only herbs for healing and a black cat who wanted bread. When you hand it back, he scans the words, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You could make this easier on yourself," he says, almost as if he's repeating something he's been told to say. Then he turns and walks away, the parchment held tight in his hand. The hours crawl. The dripping water becomes a metronome, marking the slow passage of time. You lie on the straw, staring at the slit of light until it fades into darkness again. When the younger guard finally returns, it's with another small piece of bread and a mumbled, "Eat." He lingers for a moment, then says, "They'll call you again tomorrow. Might be harder questions." You don't ask what harder means. You already have a guess. After he leaves, you curl into the straw, pulling your shawl over your head. Sleep comes fitfully, broken by the sound of footsteps above and the occasional clank of a door. Somewhere in the night, you dream of the river, broad and glittering under the sun, its current pulling you gently downstream. But when you reach for the water, it turns to black ink, swallowing your hands. You wake with your heart pounding, the darkness pressing close, and the knowledge that the worst of this day has been only its waiting. Morning comes as a pale, watery light seeping through the slit in the wall. It's hard to tell if it's truly morning or just a lighter shade of gray. But the guard's movements above you signal the change and shift. The faint smell of baking bread drifts in from somewhere far away, teasing you with memories of market days you used to take for granted. The scrape of the key in the lock makes you flinch, not from fear exactly, but from the jolt of anticipation. The younger guard appears first, holding the same tin cup and bucket of water as before. He says nothing this time, just sets them down and watches you drink. Before you can hand the cup back, the older guard's shadow fills the doorway. "Counsel summons you," he says. His voice is flat, but you catch the slight downturn of his mouth, as if he already knows this will not go well. They bind your wrists again, the rope biting into the same grooves it left days before. You're led up the stairs past the clerk, who's already scratching away with his quill. He doesn't look at you, though you're sure he hears every step. The council chamber is colder today, despite the sunlight slanting in through the windows. The magistrate sits in the same position, his blue eyes fixed on you with that same unreadable expression. On the table before him are several sheets of parchment, one of which you recognize by your own handwriting, your statement from yesterday. He taps it with one finger. "This says nothing of the devil's mark." "That's because there isn't one," you reply. A murmur ripples through the spectators. The magistrate raises a hand for silence. "We will see," he says, gesturing to a man in plain wool garments standing near the wall. He steps forward, carrying a small wooden case, which he opens to reveal several long, thin needles. You've heard of this test before, pricking the skin to find a spot that feels no pain, proof, in their minds, of a pact with dark forces. Historians still argue whether the so-called witch-finders genuinely believed in this or simply used it as theater to convince onlookers. Either way, you're about to be part of the performance. They lead you to a chair in the center of the room. The ropes are removed from your wrists only to have your arms gripped firmly by the older guard. The man with the needles steps closer, his hand steady, his face blank, as if he's fixing a saddle strap rather than touching a person. The first prick stings like a bee bite. The second makes you wince. The third, in the tender skin near your ribs, makes you jerk slightly, earning a sharper grip from the guard. Around you, the room is silent except for the soft scrape of metal on skin. One of the needles catches on a freckle. "Suspicious," the man says, as though freckles have never existed before today. He presses harder, but you grit your teeth and say nothing. After what feels like an eternity, he steps back and announces, "No clear mark found." It should be a relief, but you know it isn't. In the warped logic of this place, failing one test only means they'll invent another. The magistrate leans forward. "Then we will consider the testimony." He calls for the witnesses again, though this time there's a new face among them. A thin man in a patched brown coat who claims he saw you near the river at midnight speaking into the water. You remember that night? You'd been rinsing linens after a long day, muttering to yourself about a torn seam. But under his telling, it becomes an incantation to summon spirits. You feel the walls of the chamber close in with each word spoken against you. It's not just the stories themselves, but how easily they are swallowed by the room. When the questioning ends, the magistrate announces you'll be returned to your cell while the council considers. You hear the weight in that word, how it doesn't promise fairness, only delay. The walk back is slower today. The younger guard doesn't try to speak, though his eyes flick toward you once quickly, as if there's something he wants to say, but can't. Back in the cell, the straw smells more sour than before, and the dripping water seems louder. You lower yourself onto the bench, wrists aching from the rope. The phantom sting of the needles still lingers along your skin. You remember a story you once heard about a woman in Scotland who, during such a test, laughed at the examiner and told him to prick himself instead. The crowd had roared with laughter until someone accused her of mocking the church. She didn't live to see another dawn. As you sit in the dim light, you wonder which is worse, to be silent and let them write the ending, or to speak and hand them the ink. The next time you hear the door scrape open, it's not the guards. It's the clatter of boots that sound too light to belong to them. A boy, no older than 12, peers in, holding a folded scrap of parchment. He looks like he's been running. From my aunt, he whispers, slipping it through the bars before darting away. The sound of his retreating steps fades before you can even ask who his aunt is. The paper is rough, torn from the edge of a ledger, and the writing is hurried. They will not wait much longer. The priest has been told to prepare you for the walk. That's all it says. No name, no signature, no advice. Your mind turns over the possibilities. Was this meant as a warning or just a cruel game? Historians still argue whether such anonymous notes in witch trials were signs of secret sympathy or simply ways to stoke fear. Either way, the effect is the same. Your stomach knots, and the air in the cell feels thinner. The younger guard comes not long after, bringing a small loaf of bread. "Eat," he says quietly. "You'll need your strength." You don't miss the way he avoids your eyes. When you ask him what he's heard, he hesitates, then mutters, "Priest came this morning, said he wants to see you before sunset." It's not unusual. Many accused were offered a final confession before their sentencing, both as a chance to save the soul and, perhaps more cynically, as a neat closing chapter for the public record. You're not sure which motive drives this one. Hours pass in a kind of slow ache. You pace the small square of your cell until the soles of your feet tingle. The dripping water keeps steady time, like a clock marking the hours you have left. Finally, the guards arrive. They don't bind you this time, which feels more ominous than merciful. The walk is a short one, across the courtyard and into the small stone chapel at the heart of the compound. The air inside is warmer, scented faintly with beeswax and damp wool. A single candle burns on the altar, its flame trembling in the draught. The priest stands beside it, hands clasped, face lined with more years than his stooped shoulders suggest. "You know why you're here," he says. It's not a question. You nod. He begins gently enough, speaking of repentance and the mercy of the divine. His voice is low and rhythmic, like a bedtime story meant to calm a restless child. But as the minutes pass, the rhythm turns into a steady pressure, each word another stone laid atop your chest. You can still save your soul, he insists. Admit the truth. Speak the names of others. Unburden yourself before the Lord. You think of the stories you've heard, of women who named friends, neighbors, even family, in a desperate bid to save themselves, only to meet the same fate anyway. You've read accounts in which such confessions were later paraded as proof of the devil's vast network. It's a cruel efficiency, one voice feeding the fire that will eventually consume it. I have no names, you tell him. The priest's lips press into a thin line. He tries again, this time leaning closer, his breath warm with the scent of spiced wine. Then at least say you consorted with spirits. It will ease their judgment. Would it ease the rope, you ask? For the first time, his gaze falters. Perhaps not, he admits softly. The candle sputters, its flame bending toward the open door. In that flicker, you feel a strange calm, as if the room has shifted into slow motion. The priest sighs, straightens, and begins to recite a prayer, not for your freedom, but for your acceptance. When it ends, the guards lead you out again. The sky outside is already shifting to gold at the edges, the sun beginning its slow descent. The younger guard lingers as you step into the cell, finally meeting your eyes. They'll send for you in the morning, he says. The words fall into you like cold water. The loaf of bread still sits untouched in the corner, its crust already hardening. You stare at it and think of how many meals you've left unfinished in your life, always assuming that there would be another. You lie down on the straw, not because you're tired, but because the weight of the day has pressed you low. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls the hour, and for the first time, you wonder whether you'll hear it again tomorrow. The night feels different when you know it's your last. The darkness in your cell isn't just the absence of light. It's a thick, velvety weight, wrapping around you in folds. You lie still, listening to the layers of sound that make up the prison's nighttime, the drip of water from some unseen leak, the faint scratching of a rat in the straw, the occasional cough from another prisoner muffled through stone. Every so often, footsteps pass in the corridor, and your mind plays the cruel game of guessing whether they'll stop at your door. They never do. In witch trials, historians note, the final night was often the quietest part of the process. No interrogations, no public accusations, just a long, slow stretch of time where the condemned were left with their own thoughts. Some accounts even describe prisoners singing or whispering to themselves in the dark. Others say the silence was total, like the world had already started forgetting them. You roll onto your side, the straw rustling under you, and find yourself staring at that scrap of parchment from earlier. It catches a sliver of moonlight through the bars. Your mind keeps circling it, worrying it like a loose tooth. Who sent it? Why? And, most maddening of all, what did they mean by prepare you for the walk? The moon creeps higher, and shadows change shape. At some point, the younger guard passes by again, carrying a lantern. He hesitates at your cell, as if debating whether to say something, then simply moves on. His light fades, leaving you with the flicker-burned image of his uncertain face. Your thoughts drift to the outside world, the market square, the smell of fresh bread, the sound of the blacksmith's hammer striking metal. You picture the people you used to pass without a second thought and wonder if they'll be in the crowd tomorrow. You're not sure which would be worse, familiar faces among them, or none at all. A memory surfaces unbidden. Your grandmother's kitchen, a winter night long ago. She told you the story of a woman in the village who, accused of witchcraft, spent her last night weaving charms into her hair so her spirit wouldn't be trapped. You remember laughing at it then, but now in the heavy dark, you can almost feel the thread between that story and your own body. There's a quiet ache in your chest when you realize you're counting the hours, not for rescue, not anymore, but to measure the shrinking space between you and the morning. Somewhere near dawn, you doze. It's not sleep exactly, more like drifting on the surface of a dream you can't quite fall into. In this half place, you hear voices, two women speaking low and fast. They sound close, almost in the cell with you, though you know they can't be. One of them says, "They're lighting the pyre already." The other answers, "No, not yet. The wood must be dry." You wake with a start, heart hammering. The voices are gone. The first gray light of morning is seeping through the barred window, outlining the rough shape of the wall. The guards will come soon. The younger one will probably avoid your gaze. The older one will speak only to say, "It's time." That's how it goes in most accounts. And you'll rise, because what else can you do? You're not the first to walk this path, and you won't be the last. Historians still argue whether the condemned felt more fear in those final hours or a kind of strange acceptance. In the stillness of your cell, you can feel both, tangled together like twine you'll never separate. Outside, a bell begins to ring, low, deliberate, and far away. You close your eyes, listening to each note fade, holding on to the sound like it's the last thread keeping you in the world of the living. The sound of the bell still hangs in your ears when the iron hinges groan. The older guard appears, his expression carved from stone, as though decades of this work have erased any trace of sympathy. The younger one follows a step behind, eyes fixed somewhere over your shoulder. "It's time," the older guard says, just as you knew he would. You rise slowly, not to delay the inevitable. No one here has patience for that. But because the straw mat and cold stone floor have stiffened your limbs. Your ankles protest as you stand, but you manage to keep your balance. The scrap of parchment catches your eye again. You consider slipping it into your sleeve, but the thought dies quickly. If it's important, the time for it has already passed. The guards open the door wide, and for the first time in days, you step into the corridor. The air is cooler here, touched by faint drafts from the upper floors. Torches gutter in their sconces, leaving deep shadows along the walls. Every step you take echoes, the sound of your bare feet whispering against the worn flagstones. You half expect other prisoners to call out, some jeer of false courage or muttered prayer. But most cells remain silent. The ones who are awake watch without speaking, their faces hidden behind bars and darkness. Up a narrow stairwell, the air shifts. You smell wood smoke long before you reach the courtyard, and your stomach tightens. Wood smoke was once a pleasant scent, bread baking, winter hearths. But now it's different. It's the smell of the end. A fact you once overheard from the jailer drifts into your mind. In many towns, the pyre was lit before the prisoner arrived to avoid the awkward wait. It's practical, but it robs you of that final illusion that the day might turn another way. You pass through the main doors, and the world feels unnaturally bright. The sky is overcast, but compared to the dim corridors, it might as well be noon in midsummer. The square is already crowded. You can feel the press of eyes, hundreds of them studying you as if they're here to witness not a person, but the closing of a story. You notice small details that don't belong in a moment like this. A child with jam on his chin, a dog tugging at its rope to sniff at a cartwheel, an old woman adjusting the pins in her shawl. Life continues, even as yours is about to end. The younger guard edges closer to you, as though worried you might falter. You don't. It surprises you, this steadiness in your legs, this strange clarity in your head. Maybe it's because your body knows there's nothing left to conserve strength for. You glance toward the edge of the square and see it. Your grandmother's old friend, the one who taught you which herbs soothed fevers. She doesn't smile, doesn't nod, but her eyes follow you with a weight you can feel in your chest. You wonder if she believes you guilty, or if she's here for another reason entirely. Historians still argue whether these crowds came for justice or spectacle. The truth is probably both. Some came to see evil punished, others for the same reason. People gather at a market or festival to be part of something the village will talk about for years. And there it is, ahead of you, the platform. The wood is stacked high, dry from days without rain. The pyre is built with unsettling precision, every log placed like a craftsman's project. Nearby, a man in a leather apron stokes the smaller kindling, testing the flame's appetite. The parchment's words prepare you for the walk, return to you in a rush. Was this it? This short passage between cell and square, between anonymity and memory? Or was there something else you were supposed to notice along the way? The older guard's hand closes around your arm, guiding you to the foot of the platform. His grip is firm, but not cruel. You can feel the eyes of the crowd leaning closer, as if they might taste your fear. You take the first step. The wood creaks under your weight. Somewhere in the crowd a baby cries, and for a moment the sound is louder than the fire, louder than the murmurs, louder than the bell. The platform feels taller than it looked from the ground. Each plank shifts slightly underfoot, dry wood flexing just enough to make you imagine falling before your time. The crowd's murmur grows into a low, uneven hum, like a hive of bees unsettled by smoke. You reach the center, where a thick post rises from the stacked logs. Its base is blackened in streaks, the residue of past sentences. Someone has looped the rope neatly, coiled like a sleeping snake on a stool beside it. You have to fight the absurd urge to step back. The younger guard avoids your gaze, busying himself with adjusting the rope's length. The older one watches the executioner, a man in a leather apron with soot already smudged along his jaw. He is brisk, efficient, not cruel, but not gentle either. He might as well be preparing a cart for market. Your wrists are drawn forward, bound first in front of you, then to the post. The rope is coarse against your skin, the fibers biting like nettles. You think of the many times you've handled rope before, tying bundles of herbs, securing a roof thatch before a storm, and how this is the last time you'll feel it. A gust of wind flutters the hem of your gown, carrying with it the scent of the square, sweat, ash, and the faint sweetness of apples from a nearby stall. You wonder if that's the same vendor you once traded marjoram to for cider. The thought almost makes you smile. Almost. A boy near the front of the crowd catches your eye. He's no older than 10 and clutches a small wooden carving in his fist. It looks like a horse. His expression is not fear, not excitement, just a puzzling stillness, like he's memorizing every detail for later. The executioner begins laying the smaller kindling around your feet. Twigs first, then chips of wood, then the larger logs. Historians still argue whether victims were ever given mercy smoke first. That is, inhaling enough smoke to lose consciousness before the flames touch them. The debate is useless to you now, but the idea sits stubbornly in your mind. From the edges of the crowd, the town's bailiff steps forward, holding the written sentence. His voice rings out, rehearsed and certain, declaring your crimes for all to hear. He uses words like consorted and blasphemed, words with edges sharper than any blade. You watch the townsfolk react. Some nod grimly, others glance at one another, weighing the truth against what they've heard in whispers. A fringe detail drifts into memory, how in certain villages the condemned would be allowed to speak one last time, not to defend themselves, but to warn others against following their path. You have no such offer here. The bailiff finishes, folds the parchment, and steps back. The executioner lifts a torch from the small fire at the side. The flame dances wildly in the wind, sending sparks upward like tiny messengers to the gray sky. The wood around you waits, silent but impatient. You hear a distant sound. Hoofbeats? No, too slow, too irregular. It's the creak of a cartwheel somewhere beyond the crowd. A last delivery before noon. The normalcy of it almost breaks you. The younger guard glances up at you then, for the first time since leaving the cell. His mouth twitches, as if he might say something. But the executioner steps forward, and whatever words were there vanish. The torch lowers, touching the smallest twigs. Smoke curls upward immediately, thin and white. The smell is sharp, catching in your throat. The crowd leans closer. Somewhere, someone whispers a prayer. You take a slow breath, your last without heat in it. The parchment's message burns in your mind now, hotter than the fire at your feet. Prepare you for the walk. The walk is over. What's left is only the waiting. The flames begin their climb. The smoke thickens first, long before the heat reaches your skin. It clings to the inside of your throat, coating it in a bitter film. Each breath feels heavier than the last, like trying to drink air through wet cloth. You blink against the sting in your eyes, but the tears only smear the shapes in front of you. The flames nibble at the kindling, making small crackling noises, almost playful at first, like a fire in a kitchen hearth. The smell is not yet flesh, not yet final, just the resin and sap of fresh wood. For a heartbeat, you could almost be standing near your old cooking fire, except for the ropes, the crowd, and the unshakable knowledge that this is not supper being prepared. Historians still argue whether executions by fire in smaller towns were intentionally slowed to prolong suffering, or simply a result of poorly seasoned wood. You cannot tell which this is. The logs seem reluctant, smoking more than they burn, as if they too have doubts. Through the wavering veil of heat, you catch sight of a woman in the crowd, someone you knew once, a fellow healer. Her hand is pressed to her mouth, but her eyes are wide, unblinking. She doesn't call out. In these moments, silence is safer than compassion. The executioner prods the base of the fire with a long pole, coaxing the embers to catch. Sparks leap like tiny insects, carried upward by invisible currents. You remember a fringe superstition from years past, that if a spark from a witch's pyre landed on your skin, it could pass her curse to you. No one here seems willing to test it. The front row leans back slightly. The heat finally arrives in earnest, first on your ankles, then creeping up your calves like an unwelcome hand. It's not yet unbearable, but it steals your attention, demanding you notice it. You try to focus on the sounds instead. The low hum of the crowd, the occasional cough, the shift of boots on cobblestones. Somewhere above the rooftops, the sky has lightened. A shaft of pale sunlight pushes through the smoke, turning it gold for a fleeting moment. The boy with the carved horse is still watching you. His lips move just once, and you wonder if he's whispering goodbye, or maybe nothing at all. The wind shifts suddenly, driving the smoke into your face. You cough hard, your shoulders jerking against the ropes. The fibers dig deeper, fraying your skin. In that instant, you think of your herb garden, rows of sage, mint, and lavender, now probably overgrown, the soil dry. No one will tend it. The guard to your left adjusts his stance, glances at the executioner, then at the fire. It's rising now, licking higher along the post, the heat pushing at your knees. Your feet feel strangely heavy, as if the ground itself is pulling you downward. There is a moment, a sharp, bright instant, when the world narrows to the crackle of wood and the pounding of your heartbeat in your ears. You could almost forget the crowd exists. The executioner's face blurs into the smoke. Your thoughts slow, stretching between each breath. The rope above your wrists shifts as the post expands with heat. It creaks, the sound soft but startling. You wonder if it will snap, but you don't move. Even in the fantasy where you break free, there is nowhere to go. A fringe detail flits into your mind. In some coastal towns, they say a witch's spirit can ride the wind to the sea, escaping the fire entirely. You imagine the shore now, the waves, the salt spray, the smell of kelp. For a moment, you are there. Then the fire pops, loud and close, pulling you back. The crowd exhales collectively as though they've been holding their breath. The heat climbs higher. The waiting is over. The fire changes its voice when it truly takes hold. It stops being a polite crackle and becomes a deeper, hungrier sound, like something breathing in great, greedy gulps. You feel it first as a rush of heat climbing your legs, then as a pressure, a force that pushes you backward though you cannot move. The smoke curls past your face in dark ribbons, and the acrid taste coats your tongue. You cough again, this time harder, feeling the pull in your ribs. Somewhere deep inside, you note how strangely clinical this moment is, like observing your own end from a slight distance. In some records, historians note that witches in rural villages were sometimes strangled before the fire reached them, both to shorten the ordeal and to keep the crowd from seeing certain expressions. No such mercy seems intended for you. The executioner keeps his place, watching the flames climb, his hand idly tapping the long pole like a conductor measuring the tempo of a song. You hear a creak overhead. The post shifts slightly as the heat expands the wood, sending another shower of sparks upward. The sparks dance in the smoky sunlight, briefly beautiful, and then vanish. You remember a superstition whispered in your youth that each spark is a soul escaping the fire? If so, you wonder whose souls are leaving now. Your ankles begin to tingle with a strange, almost electric sensation, as if they've forgotten the difference between cold and heat. The skin feels tight, the air around it warped. You imagine the flames as a slow tide, advancing up the shore of your body, each wave leaving behind a deeper mark. Beyond the wall of heat, you can still pick out faces, blurred, distorted by the shimmer of the air. Some lean forward with morbid fascination, others look away, but do not leave. That boy with the wooden horse is still there, clutching it so tightly you half expect it to splinter in his hand. The wind shifts again, scattering the smoke sideways, revealing the front row more clearly. You spot a man in a wide-brimmed hat, one you treated years ago for a fever that nearly took his life. He doesn't acknowledge you, but the way his jaw tightens tells you he remembers. Whether with gratitude or regret, you can't tell. A fringe belief from the eastern provinces drifts into your mind, that a witch who dies with her eyes open will curse everyone she sees in her final moment. It was meant to frighten executioners into lowering their gaze. You wonder if anyone here will dare meet your eyes at the very end. The fire roars louder, and a fresh wave of heat slams into your knees. You flinch instinctively, pulling at the ropes. The fibers bite deeper, drawing thin lines of pain across your wrists. The crowd reacts almost imperceptibly, some leaning forward as though waiting for a cry. You give them none. Historians still argue whether this kind of silence was defiance, resignation, or the body simply conserving its last scraps of breath. In truth, it is all three. You find that speaking or screaming would be a waste of energy you no longer own. The flames are high enough now that their tips lick against the bottom edge of your tunic. The smell shifts, becoming sharper, more personal. The sound changes too, a snapping, like the tearing of cloth. The post behind you grows hot enough that you can feel its warmth through your back. Above, the sky is a washed-out blue, but the edges are blurred by the haze of smoke. A bird wheels overhead, briefly visible, then disappears beyond the rooftops. You fix on that small movement, holding it in your mind like a secret, something only you noticed. The executioner steps forward, jabs the base of the fire again, and the crowd murmurs approval. The flames answer with a sudden leap, and for an instant you swear the heat steals not just the air, but the very sound from the square. And then, almost mercifully, the world narrows. Heat, smoke, heartbeat, breath. 4 things, each demanding more than you have left to give. You're not sure when the sound returns, but when it does, it comes in fragments. A cough somewhere to your left, the snap of a stick, the faint cry of a baby carried away from the square. All of it rides on the deeper, steady roar of the fire. Your knees give a small, involuntary tremor. The post holds you upright, but you feel how your body leans more heavily into the ropes. Heat shimmers rise in thick waves, warping the faces of the crowd until they seem like moving oil paintings. A fragment of memory slips in, a rainy spring afternoon years ago when you stood in the market, buying cinnamon for a tincture. The air was cool, the stalls crowded, and a vendor had told you a joke about a chicken and a priest. You can't remember the punchline, but you remember laughing so hard your side ached. That memory now feels like it belongs to another person entirely. Some scholars claim that in these moments, the mind searches frantically for unrelated memories to shield itself from the present. Others argue it's simply the brain faltering, letting random thoughts spill through as the body fails. You decide it doesn't matter which is true. A wisp of smoke curls into your mouth, making you gag. Your eyes water, but the tears don't fall. They evaporate almost as soon as they form. The crowd sways in your vision as if you're looking at them through rippling water. One figure, cloaked and hooded, stands utterly still at the back. You notice the glint of a chain at their neck. A talisman? A key? Impossible to tell. You blink, and when your eyes open again, the figure is gone, as if they'd never been there. The heat has reached your thighs now, a constant, unrelenting presence that feels less like fire and more like the world itself has decided to press in on you. You hear the faint hiss of sap boiling out of the wooden post, tiny blisters forming on the surface behind you. A fringe bit of folklore surfaces, something you overheard in a tavern once. A drunk mason claimed that the smoke of a witch's fire could carry her soul to the rafters of heaven, where she could sit just above the saints, watching. You'd laughed at the time. Now the thought doesn't seem so ridiculous. The executioner circles behind you, and for the first time, you feel a faint touch. A hand testing the ropes, checking their hold. His fingers are calloused, the nails blackened from soot. No words pass between you. He steps away, and the fire consumes the silence. Historians still argue whether these public burnings were more about punishment or spectacle. Standing here, you realize they are the same thing. The punishment is the spectacle is the punishment. Without the crowd, it would be only an execution. With them, it is a performance. A piece of your clothing ignites fully now, the flames biting and curling the fabric inward until it crumbles into glowing lace. Your skin feels as though it's wrapped in a fever that can't break. You can't help but pull against the ropes again, though the movement achieves nothing but another sharp sting in your wrists. Somewhere in the haze, you hear laughter, not cruel exactly, but the nervous kind, too loud, too quick. You fix your gaze toward the sound and catch the sight of two young men whispering to each other. One notices your eyes and turns away sharply. The other follows. Above you, the smoke thickens, gathering into a single dark plume that twists upward into the pale sky. It's mesmerizing in its way, how it folds and curls, each shape vanishing the moment it forms. You wonder if someone far away will see it and wonder what it means. The heat licks higher. Your breath comes shorter, shallower. The square feels impossibly still now, even with the restless shifting of bodies. The fire's voice is all that remains, loud, hungry, patient. And then you think of the boy with the wooden horse again, wondering if he'll remember this day and if he'll ever be able to tell it without his voice catching. The square tilts, not literally, but in the way your senses distort when too much is happening to one body at once. You taste salt and ash together, as though the sea has come to meet the fire. The crackle beneath you is no longer a sound so much as a constant vibration, a hum that seeps into your bones. The first true bite of the flames on bare skin is nothing like you imagined. It's sharper, almost surgical, before it blooms into something larger, hotter, and impossibly insistent. Your muscles seize, then release, and you realize you've stopped breathing for several seconds. A sudden shift in the crowd draws your attention. Someone has moved through them with purpose, forcing gaps between bodies. A man in a long brown coat, carrying what looks like a ledger. He pauses, speaks to one of the guards, and you can see the guard's brows draw together in something like confusion. You strain to hear, but catch nothing beyond the fire's roar. Then, just as suddenly, the man is gone, swallowed back into the mass of bodies. Historians still argue whether records of certain trials were deliberately altered or erased entirely to hide questionable proceedings. The existence of that ledger in the man's hands makes you wonder if your own name will survive the night in ink, or if it will vanish into blank pages. Your knees are nearly useless now, trembling without rhythm. The ropes cut deeper, and the smell, your smell, is thick and undeniable. For a brief, absurd second, you remember the market stalls roasting meat in summer, and the thought turns your stomach. Somewhere beyond the smoke, a church bell tolls. Not the shrill, urgent ring of warning. This is slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. 1, 2, 3. The sound threads through the haze, marking time you can't keep track of anymore. The crowd shifts again, murmurs rippling outward like wind over grass. A young woman has fainted near the front, her bonnet askew as two others drag her away. You don't know if it's from the heat, the sight, or something else entirely. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. An old belief that if someone faints at an execution, it means their own soul briefly slipped from their body, unwilling to witness what their eyes had forced upon them. Looking at her slack face, you think maybe that's not so far-fetched. The flames find your side now, climbing with an almost curious persistence. Heat blooms upward toward your ribs, and each inhale becomes a gamble. Air or smoke, you can't predict which will win. Your vision narrows to the space immediately before you, colors turning to sepia, edges feathering like the worn pages of a book. Someone shouts your name, not angrily, not as an accusation, but as if calling you back from somewhere you've wandered. You can't place the voice. The hooded figure from earlier appears again, this time closer, standing just beyond the inner ring of guards. They tilt their heads slightly, as though measuring you, and then raise one gloved hand. It's not a wave, it's more deliberate. A sign? A farewell? Before you can decide, the smoke swallows them whole once more. Historians still debate whether such figures at executions were clerics, secret sympathizers, or simply curious strangers who liked to stand apart. You realize you'll never know the answer. Your head tips forward under its own weight, and the sound of the crowd dims, replaced by a deeper internal noise, like wind moving through a canyon. For the first time all day, your shoulders relax, not because the pain has gone, but because your body seems to have decided it's not worth the fight. A small child's cry rings out, sharp and sudden, and the fire responds with a loud pop as one of the beams splits. Sparks leap into the air, catching briefly in the sunlight before vanishing. It's almost beautiful if you look at it the right way. You close your eyes, not in surrender, but to better picture the boy with the wooden horse, the girl with the dark eyes, the river in spring. You hold them all for as long as the fire will allow. Your world has shrunk to heat, sound, and fragments of thought that slip away as quickly as they arrive. The edges of everything are soft now, as if the smoke is not just in your lungs, but in your mind. You feel the ropes loosen slightly, not because mercy has come, but because the fibers are charring, splitting under the strain. Above the roar of the fire, you catch another sound. The uneven beat of boots on cobblestones, not the steady rhythm of guards on duty, but the urgent, unpracticed pace of someone running against the tide. You tilt your head just enough to see a man pushing forward through the crowd. His hair is wild, his coat unfastened, and in one hand he clutches a rolled scrap of parchment. Historians still argue whether last-minute pardons in witch trials were more political theater than genuine reprieve. Sometimes they arrived just late enough to be useless. Letters waved in the air for witnesses to see, while the accused burned all the same. The man shouts something, maybe your name, maybe not. The crowd shifts around him, but the guards at the inner ring raise their pikes and refuse to part. One even steps forward, pressing a hand to the man's chest. You can't hear their words, but you can read the stubborn set of the guard's jaw. Whatever's written on that parchment will never touch your skin. The heat builds again, climbing higher, wrapping around your chest like molten rope. You cough, but the air is so thick it feels like drinking something heavy and hot. A bitter tang coats your tongue, and then, almost absurdly, you think about rain. The way it sounds on the thatched roofs in spring, that soft, irregular drumming. The way wet earth smells, rich and alive, nothing like the dead ash swirling around you now. You remember standing under an eave as a child, cupping your hands to catch drops that slid from the edge of the roof, giggling at the cold shock in your palms. That memory feels so real, so present, you almost expect to see dark clouds rolling overhead. A guard nearby coughs into his sleeve, eyes watering from the smoke. For a moment, you meet his gaze. He doesn't look angry or triumphant, just tired. You wonder if tomorrow he will remember your face in the same way you've remembered others. Faded, unclear, but carrying some unshakable weight. A fringed tidbit slips into your mind. In some villages, guards at executions would toss a coin into the ashes afterward, believing it bought the soul a quicker passage to wherever it was meant to go. You have no coin, but you like to imagine someone will think to leave one for you. The hooded figure is gone now. The man with the parchment has vanished too, swallowed by the crowd or pulled away by force. The only constant is the fire's insistence, its greedy push upward, wrapping you in an embrace that is anything but gentle. The bell begins to toll again, slower this time, each strike ringing into the space between heartbeats. 1, pause. 2, pause. You find yourself counting along even as the numbers slip and blur. Your knees give way completely, and the world tilts again. This time, it's not just in your head. The stake shifts slightly as weight pulls it to one side. The ropes groan. Above you, smoke funnels into the sky, breaking apart in the breeze. You wonder if anyone will see it from a distant hill and think, for just a moment, that a storm is coming. Somewhere in the crowd, a voice begins to sing. It's faint, unsteady, but clear enough to reach you. The melody is unfamiliar, yet something in its rhythm feels ancient, older than the cobblestones underfoot. The sound threads through the smoke, weaving itself into your fading awareness. And for the first time since this began, you don't feel entirely alone. The song lingers, stretching each note like a thread of spun glass, delicate and impossible to hold. You focus on it, letting it pull you away from the fire's bite. It's a woman's voice, soft but steady, and though you can't make out the words, you feel certain it's meant for you. There's a strange calm in that realization. The fire is still there, gnawing at your legs, curling its fingers up your sides, but the panic has dulled. You imagine yourself drifting, not away from the stake, but through it, as if the smoke itself could carry you elsewhere. The melody dips and rises, and you remember something your grandmother once said, that certain songs can guide a soul between worlds. Historians still argue whether these death songs were superstition or survival, chants to keep the condemned from crying out and breaking under fear. Some even claim that executioners encouraged them, believing it made the crowd quieter, more manageable. You open your mouth, not to scream, but to hum along, though your voice catches on the smoke. The sound is rough, almost comical, like a barn door creaking in the wind, but it's enough to make the singer's tone swell for a heartbeat, as if she knows you've joined her. The heat shifts suddenly, a brief pocket of cooler air brushing your face. You blink, realizing it's not mercy, but the wind changing direction, pulling the smoke toward the opposite side of the square. For the first time in minutes, you can see past the first ring of onlookers. Faces stare back, rows upon rows, some openly fascinated, others unable to meet your gaze. In the middle of the crowd, you spot a young boy sitting on his father's shoulders, clutching a small wooden carving in both hands. It's a bird, you think. A sparrow, its wings spread. The boy isn't looking at the fire. He's watching you, eyes wide, mouth closed tight, as if holding in a secret. Quirky as it sounds, you remember a tidbit about medieval charms carved into the shapes of animals, tokens meant to guide spirits to a safe afterlife. Birds were especially popular, their flight symbolizing the soul's escape from earthly bounds. Maybe that little carving is for you. Maybe the boy believes it will fly when you cannot. The singing grows louder now, joined by a second voice, deeper, male, harmonizing with the first. The crowd stirs uneasily. This isn't the sanctioned chanting of priests. It's something older, harder to trace, like the echo of a language that never quite died. You try to lift your head toward the sound, but the ropes bite into your shoulders. The fire pops, sending a spray of sparks into the air. A few land on your sleeve, burning small holes in the fabric before dying out. The contrast between their sharp sting and the broader, slower ache of the flames is oddly grounding. Your thoughts drift again, not to the trial, not to the accusations, but to small, forgotten moments. The cool weight of a silver coin in your palm, the way morning frost clung to the edge of the well in winter, the smell of wet wool drying near a hearth. They come and go like fireflies, each glowing for a heartbeat before fading into the smoke. Somewhere behind you, a voice barks an order. The crowd quiets, and the singing stops. The silence that follows is almost heavier than the noise before, pressing in on all sides. A guard steps into your peripheral vision, his expression unreadable. He glances at the fire, then at you, and for a moment you think, absurdly, that he's about to apologize. But instead, he adjusts the position of the wood, feeding the flames where they faltered. A flicker of fear returns, sharp and cold. You'd almost forgotten it could feel like that. The boy with the sparrow carving is still watching. This time, he raises it slightly, almost like an offering, and you find yourself smiling. Barely, but enough that your cheeks tighten against the soot. If nothing else, you think, you will leave this place with that image. A boy, a wooden bird, and the belief, whether his or yours, that flight is still possible. The flames have found new life, fed by the guard's careful arrangement. You feel the heat crawl higher, licking at your ribs, searing through cloth and skin alike. Every instinct in your body screams to pull away, but there's nowhere to go, only the tight bite of rope and the solid post at your back. A shift in the air draws your eyes upward. Above the square, the sky is turning the color of old pewter, clouds bruising at the edges. The first hints of rain drift down, light, hesitant, more mist than drops. The crowd murmurs at the change, some pulling hoods over their heads, others looking skyward with the vague unease of people who still see weather as a sign. In truth, it often was. Medieval folk took sudden shifts in the sky as omens, favorable or otherwise. Historians still argue whether light rain at an execution was seen as mercy from above or a bad portent for the community. You'd settle for either, as long as it meant the flames dimmed. The rain doesn't extinguish the fire, but it does slow it, forcing the wood to hiss and spit. A curl of steam rises, wrapping around your face like ghostly fingers. You breathe it in, and for the first time in what feels like forever, the air doesn't scald your throat. Somewhere off to the left, a woman coughs loudly, a wet, hacking sound that pulls your gaze. She's older, with a face lined deep from sun and worry. You recognize her, though you can't place from where. Maybe the market, maybe just a passing nod on the road. Her eyes meet yours briefly, and she mouths something. You can't hear it, but you think it's a single word. Hold. The absurdity makes you almost laugh. Hold? What else are you doing? Another voice rises in the crowd. Not song this time, but argument. A man is shouting about the weather, about how the trial was rushed. You catch phrases, wrong season, no blessing, against the signs. His voice cuts through the steady murmur like a thrown stone in still water. The guard near you shifts uncomfortably, clearly aware of the change in mood. Executions, for all their grim purpose, relied on the crowd's cooperation. Lose them, and the whole ritual could crumble into something far messier. You remember a peculiar fact. In some towns, if a condemned person survived the initial execution attempt, they were sometimes pardoned, seen as spared by divine will. It was rare, but not unheard of. A quirk of the age, one that could turn the tide in the space of a heartbeat. The fire surges again, snapping you out of the thought. A gust of wind forces smoke into your face, making your eyes water until the world blurs. Somewhere in the haze, you hear a splash, a bucket of water hitting part of the woodpile. The crowd gasps. Whether it was thrown in mercy or mischief, you can't tell. Through the shifting smoke, you see movement. The boy with the sparrow carving is gone. In his place stands a taller figure in a hood, face hidden. They're too close to the line of guards for comfort, but no one seems to notice them. The hooded figure tilts their head slightly, almost in greeting, then disappears into the press of bodies. Your mind races, trying to stitch meaning from scraps. Was that planned? Coincidence? Or just another trick of the heat and your fraying senses? The rain thickens now, steady enough that droplets run down your temples. Each one is a tiny shock of cool against the heat. The fire resists stubbornly, but the steam is winning in patches, creating pockets of relief where you can breathe a little deeper. You hold on to the thought just a little longer, just enough to see what happens next. If the rain continues, if the crowd wavers, if some old superstition tips the scales, you might not need to imagine escape. You might just witness it. The rain has turned from a polite mist to something with real weight. Each drop thudding against your shoulders, running in rivulets down your arms, finding its way under the ropes. The crowd is no longer the cohesive wall of faces it was. Cloaks are pulled tighter. People are shifting their feet, whispering to one another. Some look irritated, others uneasy, as if the weather itself has broken the spell of the moment. The guards are trying to maintain the rhythm of the execution, prodding the damp logs with poles, shielding the fire from gusts of wind. You hear the head guard bark an order, his voice thin against the growing patter of rain. The wood hisses and pops in protest, stubbornly clinging to its embers. There's an old superstition you once overheard at the market. Fire that refuses to rise is fire that refuses the deed. Historians still argue whether phrases like that were common folk wisdom or just the invention of later storytellers. Right now, you don't care which is true. It's a thought to cling to. Somewhere toward the back of the crowd, a commotion breaks out. You can't see much through the smoke and drizzle, but the sound is distinct. The rough thud of boots, the higher pitch of voices raised not in cheering, but in dispute. A moment later, you hear a priest's voice, calm but firm, cutting through the unrest. He's speaking Latin, but you catch the familiar cadences of blessing. The rain slides into your mouth as you breathe, cool and metallic. Your mind snags on a fringe detail you once heard in passing. In some medieval towns, priests were called to halt executions if they suspected the accused had not been given the proper rites. It wasn't mercy exactly, more like bureaucracy wrapped in faith, but it could buy time. The guard nearest you keeps glancing toward the disturbance. His grip on the pike loosens slightly, his stance shifting in the mud. If there was ever a moment to test the rope's give, it might be now. But you feel the rough fibers against your wrists. Soaked, yes, but still tight enough to bite. Another burst of shouting pulls your gaze upward. The mayor, damp, scowling, has stepped forward from his covered seat. His feathered hat droops pathetically, rain streaming from its brim. He gestures sharply at the fire, then toward the priest. Even from here, you can read the irritation in his stance. Lightning flickers far off beyond the hills, illuminating the low clouds. You can almost feel the mood shifting, the certainty of the ritual eroding with each new distraction. People begin edging backward, away from the smoke and the growing puddles. In the far corner of the square, you spot the hooded figure again, watching from beneath the shadow of a sagging roof. The fire sputters, sending up a last half-hearted wave of sparks before settling into a stubborn smolder. The guards work harder, but the effect is more steam than flame. And in the steam, shapes seem to form. Faces, animals, fleeting outlines that vanish as soon as you blink. You tell yourself it's just heat and rain colliding, but some part of you wonders if the crowd sees them too. The priest is closer now, speaking directly to the head guard. You can't make out the words over the rainfall, but the tone is decisive, almost final. The head guard shakes his head, then looks at the mayor, who still stands glaring. Historians still debate whether medieval executions were ever truly stopped mid-process due to omens, weather, or divine signs, or if such stories were embroidered later for drama. But you can feel deep in your chest that something is changing here. The hooded figure takes a step forward, and in that instant, you realize their gaze has never left yours, not once since they appeared. The hooded figure moves through the crowd like water, finding the easiest path. No shoving, no wasted motion, yet somehow never blocked. Their cloak is dark, but not soaked like everyone else's, as if the rain refuses to cling. You can't decide whether that detail is comforting or deeply wrong. The guards notice them too. The nearest one straightens, his shoulders stiffening under the weight of chainmail dampened by rain. He takes a step toward the figure, pike angled slightly forward, but the hooded stranger simply raises a hand. The guard freezes, as if that single casual gesture pressed an invisible weight onto his chest. The priest is still speaking with the head guard, voice low and insistent, but you notice his eyes flicker toward the figure and then back again, quick, nervous. You can almost hear his thoughts. Not here, not now. There's a strange smell in the air, cutting through the mingled scents of wet wood and smoke. It's sharp, metallic, almost like a forge, but with something herbal underneath. You know it instantly. Years ago, an apothecary whispered to you about a rare resin burned to mask the scent of certain powders, illegal ones in the wrong hands. Historians still argue whether medieval apothecaries really dabbled in explosives or if it's just a later myth. The crowd has begun to sense that whatever is happening is not part of the scheduled execution. People shift uneasily, some pushing forward for a better look, others retreating toward the safety of covered doorways. The figure stops just outside the cordon of guards, tilts their head slightly, and for the first time, you see their face, or part of it. The skin is pale in a way that's not quite natural. The eyes an unsettling shade between green and gray like a stormy sea. They don't blink. They speak your name, not loudly, but somehow every syllable cuts through the rain like a bell. You feel a ripple in the air, not unlike the moment before lightning strikes. Hair lifting on your arms, heartbeat suddenly louder in your ears. The ropes around your wrists tighten, then slacken, as if the fibers themselves are confused. The head guard finally notices the figure directly, his jaw tightening. "Remove them," he barks, and two soldiers step forward. But the hooded figure doesn't move. Instead, they reach into their cloak, pulling free a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. The bundle is tossed onto the smoldering wood at your feet. The resin scent swells, sharper now, and the smolder flares, not into ordinary fire, but into brief, unnatural blue flame. The crowd gasps. Someone crosses themselves. Another person whispers something about signs from God. Historians still debate whether blue fire in medieval Europe was ever recorded outside of later romanticized accounts, or if it was simply chemistry misunderstood. The priest's voice cuts in again, louder now, commanding. You catch only fragments, sanctity, omen, judgment, before another crack of distant thunder swallows the words. Your ankles are still bound, but the warmth from the strange fire licks at the ropes in a way that feels deliberate. The fibers twitch, fray, loosen, and the figure? They stand perfectly still, rain sliding over their hood, those sea-gray eyes fixed entirely on you. The mayor shouts something, gesturing wildly toward the guards, toward the fire, toward the stranger, but no one moves. Not the guards, not the townsfolk, not even the priest. The square has become a tableau, a painting in which you're the only thing still breathing. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman laughs, not a joyful laugh, something sharp, cutting, like glass breaking. The sound shatters whatever tension held the scene frozen. The rope at your wrists finally gives way, and in that fraction of a heartbeat, the hooded figure turns, as if inviting you to follow. You don't think. Thinking is for quiet mornings and safe kitchens. Now is the moment for instinct, and your instincts scream at you to move. Your ankles are still tangled in rough hemp, but the loosened knots give just enough space for you to wrench one foot forward, then the other. The hooded figure has already melted into the mass of townsfolk, the crowd's shifting bodies shielding them from the guard's line of sight. You push after them, shoulders colliding with damp wool and clammy skin. Someone yells your name. Whether in warning or betrayal, you can't tell. Behind you, the guards have shaken off their hesitation. You hear the scrape of boots over cobblestone and the heavy clink of weapons in motion. The mayor's voice rises above the rain, barking orders like a general whose soldiers are already losing the field. A hand catches your sleeve. Reflex takes over. You twist, tearing the fabric, and shove yourself sideways into a narrow alley you hadn't even noticed until the last second. The hooded figure waits at the far end, their shape a shadow within shadows. The alley smells of wet stone and rotting straw. Somewhere above, a loose shutter bangs in the wind. It's the kind of space that could be a shortcut or a trap. Historians still argue whether medieval alleyways truly served as escape routes for the desperate, or if such tales are romanticized by ballads and penny plays. Right now, you're betting the ballads had a kernel of truth. The figure moves without looking back, steps silent despite the puddles. You follow, your breath loud in your ears, the cold air burning your lungs. At the alley's end, a low archway opens into what looks like a small courtyard, long abandoned. Ivy chokes the walls and an old well leans slightly to one side. Here, finally, the figure turns to face you fully. Their voice, when it comes, is quiet, but carries the weight of someone who is used to being obeyed. They will not stop. You have one chance. Take it now. You want to ask 100 questions. Who are you? Why me? What is happening? But the first thing out of your mouth is, why help me? For a moment, those gray-green eyes soften, almost human. Because I've seen this before, and I'm tired of watching history repeat itself. From the square, the sound of shouts grows louder. The guards have found the alley. The figure reaches into their cloak again, pulling out a narrow strip of parchment covered in writing you don't recognize. They press it into your palm and close your fingers around it. The parchment is warm, impossibly warm, as though it's been resting in sunlight. Follow the path past the west gate, they say. Keep walking until the land dips and you hear running water. Then burn it. You open your mouth to speak, but they're already moving toward the opposite wall where ivy hangs thick. A quick motion, a hidden latch, and part of the wall swings open just enough for them to slip through. Then they're gone. You stand there, the rain running cold down your back, the parchment a small, defiant heat in your hand. The first guard bursts into the courtyard, weapon raised, eyes scanning. You're cornered unless Your fingers tighten on the parchment. Somewhere beyond this courtyard lies the west gate. Somewhere beyond that, the running water. The choice stands before you like a doorway you didn't know existed until now. And though the town square, the fire, and the stake are still only a few hundred paces away, they already feel like a different lifetime. And so, your steps carry you out of the courtyard, into the rain-washed night, each footfall pushing the square further behind you. The voices fade, swallowed by distance and the steady hiss of rain against earth. The cold no longer bites quite as sharply, the air loosening its grip on your lungs as you leave the twisting streets behind. You find the west gate just as the figure described, its heavy timbers slick with rain, the iron hinges blackened by time. Beyond it, the land dips gently, as if the earth itself is exhaling, and in the quiet you catch it, the low, constant murmur of water threading through the dark. Your pace slows. There's no rush now, not in this moment. The parchment still rests in your hand, its warmth steady, almost comforting. You study the faint script one last time, though you can't read it, before striking a match. The flame dances in the wet air, fragile but certain. The paper curls inward, darkening until the last ember winks out and the warmth leaves your palm. What remains is only the rain, the night, and the sound of water ahead. You keep walking. The ground softens beneath your boots, the scent of wet grass replacing that of smoke and burning resin. And with every step, the world feels quieter, calmer, like the slow unwinding of a tightly coiled spring. Somewhere behind you, history will write what it wishes. Whether they call you witch, fugitive, or ghost doesn't matter now. The path bends. The stream comes into view, silvered under the moon. And here, finally, you stop, letting the night wrap around you like a blanket. You breathe, and you let yourself be still. If you are still awake, don't worry. We will still be with you tonight. Let's go to the second story titled Witch Hunter and the Curse. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into a soaking wind-lashed night where the kind of sound you hear first isn't the rain, but the deep, hollow boom of a drum. You can almost feel it vibrate through the timber beams of your roof, rattling the iron hook where your cloak hangs. The air smells of wet earth and wood smoke, and through the window's warped glass, you can just make out lanterns bobbing in the square like fireflies gone mad. You probably won't survive this, not if you go outside dressed like you normally do for a midnight stroll. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and tell me where you're watching from right now, and the local time where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The drumbeat calls you, slow at first, 3 strikes, a pause, 3 more, but then faster, until your own heartbeat tries to match it. You pull your cloak tight and step into the cold. Rain pelts your face in sharp little needles. The cobblestones are slick, and the old gutter at the corner burbles like a small brook. You pass the baker's shop, dark, the smell of yesterday's bread faint in the damp air. In the square, half the village is gathered, their breath rising in pale wisps. Lanterns hang from a makeshift frame, throwing long shadows that sway and bend. On the raised platform, the headman looks older than yesterday, his face drawn tight, like cured leather. Behind him stands the church bell ringer holding the drumsticks, his hand shaking slightly, not from cold, but from what he knows. He clears his throat, and the words he speaks are the kind you wish you could unhear. 3 deaths in 3 nights, all with the same strange mark burned into the skin. 1 on the wrist, 1 on the neck, 1 right over the heart. No footprints leading to or from the houses, no sound, no broken doors, just the bodies, and in each case, a dead crow left beside them. You think of the old tales, the ones the traveling peddler used to tell when the fire was low, that a curse can travel on wings. Crows were messengers, carriers of whispers too quiet for human ears. A low murmur ripples through the crowd. Someone swears under their breath. Another makes the sign of the cross. A woman near you clutches her child tighter. The headman holds up his hand. "There's more," he says. "Tonight, a stranger came into the village. He claims to know the source of this." All eyes shift to the side of the platform where a figure stands half hidden in the shadows. The rain drips from the brim of his hat. He's taller than most, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a coat that has seen too many roads. His boots are caked in a kind of reddish mud you've never seen in these parts. He steps forward, and the lantern light catches the glint of something metallic at his belt. Maybe a blade, maybe something stranger. "I've seen this before," he says, his voice low but carrying. "It's no sickness, no accident. It's a curse, and it moves faster than you think." He glances over the crowd, and for a moment his eyes meet yours. If you don't act now, it will take the whole village before the moon wanes. Historians still argue whether rural witchcraft in the 14th century was more a matter of superstition than fact. But in moments like this, superstition feels safer than logic. The man speaks again. "I can track it, but I'll need help. One person who can walk where I cannot. One who knows the village." And just like that, the crowd parts ever so slightly toward you, as if they've already decided you're that person. You feel the cold in your bones now, not from the rain, but from the weight of their stares. Somewhere inside, a part of you wants to step back into the warmth of your home, bolt the door, and pretend this night never happened. But the drumbeat still echoes in your head, a reminder that whatever is out there doesn't wait. The stranger holds out a hand, not to shake, but an invitation. Behind him, the headman looks at you with something between relief and apology. You take a slow breath, tasting the damp, metallic air. Somewhere in the dark beyond the lantern glow, a crow caws once, sharply, like a warning. The rain has eased into a fine mist now, the kind that clings to your hair and eyelashes, turning the world into a smear of silver and shadow. The stranger's hand is still outstretched, and without quite knowing why, you take it. His grip is firm, calloused, and just warm enough to remind you he's human, though you're not entirely sure that's comforting. He doesn't waste time with introductions. Instead, he guides you away from the square, past the last of the lantern light, into the darker veins of the village, where the streets narrow and the houses lean toward each other like whispering conspirators. Somewhere behind you, the drum starts up again, softer now, as though marking the start of something you're not meant to name. "You've seen the marks?" he asks, voice pitched low. You nod. "On the baker's wife and the tailor." You don't mention the third victim, the miller's son, because you're still trying to unsee it. "They're not burns," he says. "Not really. They're what's left when a curse takes root and feeds. He glances at you as if checking to see if you'll laugh at the word curse. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed curses had physical form, or whether they simply used the idea to explain what they couldn't otherwise control. But here, in the damp breath of the night, it doesn't feel like theory. You turn a corner, and the smell changes. Less of wet stone, more of something sour, like dried herbs left to rot. The stranger pauses beside a low, crooked house, its shutters hanging at odd angles. "This is where it started," he says. You frown. "The apothecary?" He shakes his head. "No, the apothecary died 2 winters ago, but someone's been using his rooms, someone who knows his craft." He reaches into his coat and pulls out a small iron charm, nothing more than a twisted loop with a knot at its center. "Keep this on you," he says. "It won't stop the curse, but it might confuse it. The charm is cold against your palm, heavier than it looks." You slip it into your pocket and follow him inside. The door groans on its hinges, and the smell intensifies. Mildew, damp parchment, something faintly metallic. Shelves sag under the weight of jars filled with powders and liquids in shades the earth shouldn't make. He moves to a table in the center of the room where a single candle burns. Its wax has pooled into strange shapes, as if melting in 2 directions at once. On the table lies a book, its cover cracked, its pages warped from moisture. He doesn't touch it. "Curses," he says, "are rarely born here. They're called, invited, fed." You glance at the book. The ink inside is a faded brown, and in some places, symbols are drawn over the words. Circles, lines, tiny wing shapes that look like they could fly off the page if you stared too long. One in particular catches your attention, a crow with its beak open, a thread of smoke curling from it. The stranger notices your gaze. "That," he says, "is the sigil of the night messenger. The curse rides it, and it doesn't stop until the one who called it is gone." "Gone as in dead?" you ask. His eyes don't flinch. "Gone as in erased. No burial, no marker. The earth can't remember them." A drop of water falls from the rafters and lands on your shoulder, startling you more than it should. You realize the candle flame hasn't flickered once since you entered, even though the door is still slightly ajar. Something is holding the air here unnaturally still. He steps back from the table and motions for you to follow. "We can't stay. Whoever's feeding the curse will know we were here." Outside, the mist has thickened into a low fog. The houses seem further apart now, their outlines vague. You hear a single wing beat above, then nothing. The stranger doesn't speak until you reach the edge of the village, where the path narrows into the old deer track that winds toward the forest. "If you want to help me," he says, "you'll need to see where it sleeps." You blink at him. "The curse sleeps?" He almost smiles. "Even curses need to rest, but they don't sleep like we do. They sink into places where the world's thin, places where one step can take you somewhere else entirely." You glance toward the forest, where the fog is swallowing the first row of trees. The thought of stepping into that is enough to make your stomach tighten. "And where exactly is that?" He points toward a darker patch of fog, so dense it looks like smoke. "There, just before dawn. That's when we'll find it. And maybe," he adds, "find the one who called it. Somewhere behind you, from the village you've just left, The crow caws again. Only this time it's answered by another, deeper call from the trees ahead. The forest doesn't welcome you. It swallows you. The path is gone within 10 steps, traded for a spongy carpet of wet leaves and roots that curl like grasping fingers. The air here smells different. Damp earth, pine resin, and something faintly metallic, like rainwater in an old bucket. Every sound is muted, as though the trees have agreed to keep your presence a secret. The stranger moves with the quiet precision of someone who's walked this route many times, pausing now and then to tilt his head toward a sound you can't hear. You try to match his steps, but your boots catch on roots, sending faint crackles of leaves into the silence. You'll want to watch your footing, he says without turning. Some of these aren't roots. You glance down. At first, you see only twisted wood. Then one of the roots twitches, curling slightly before vanishing into the soil. Snakes? You ask, trying to keep your voice light. Worse, he says. Roots remember things, and some of them don't like being stepped on. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were metaphors for the dangers of the wild, or whether early witch hunters genuinely thought nature itself could guard the cursed. Tonight, you're not in the mood to debate. After what feels like an hour, you reach a break in the trees. The clearing ahead is shrouded in fog that doesn't move like normal mist. It swirls slowly, patterns forming and dissolving, as if something beneath it is breathing. This is it, he says, the place between places. You step closer and feel an almost physical pressure against your chest, like the air is thicker here. The ground is bare, save for a single stone slab in the center, slick with moss. Strange carvings cover its surface, spirals, jagged lines, and a single hollow in the middle just large enough to fit a fist. The stranger kneels beside it. The curse sleeps here. It's drawn to places where the earth remembers old bargains. He traces one of the spirals with his finger. This one's older than the village, older than the church. You crouch beside him. The carvings seem to shift if you stare too long, as though they're not quite committed to the shape you're seeing. So how do we wake it, you ask? We don't, he says. We wait for it to wake itself. But we can catch it in the act. He pulls a pouch from his coat and scatters its contents across the stone. Dried petals, grains of something black, and a few shards of bone so small they could be mistaken for twigs. The scent is sharp, like burnt rosemary mixed with iron. This will draw it to the surface sooner, he explains. Curses are curious. They can't resist a trail. The fog thickens, curling inward toward the slab. You feel a sudden chill at the back of your neck, the kind that makes you turn even though you know nothing's there. But something is, just at the edge of sight. A shadow slides across the stone, too fast to have been cast by you or the stranger. It stretches upward, forming something vaguely humanoid, but too tall, its arms too long. You hear a sound, not a growl, not a hiss, but the faintest rustle, like pages turning in a sealed room. Your pulse quickens. Is that it? Yes, he says quietly. Don't speak to it, and whatever you do, don't answer if it speaks to you first. You don't have time to ask why. The shadow's head tilts, as if listening. Then, in a voice that doesn't match its form, soft, almost kindly, it says, "Your name." The stranger steps between you and the shadow, pulling another charm from his coat. This one is a simple ring of twisted iron, but it catches what little light there is and throws it back in sharp sparks. Back, he tells it, his tone still calm, but threaded with something harder. The shadow doesn't retreat. Instead, it tilts its head the other way, and the carvings on the stone seem to pulse faintly. You realize with a start that they're glowing, not brightly, but with the same deep orange of embers buried under ash. It's feeding, the stranger says. It's found something nearby. Someone nearby. Your stomach knots. In the village? He doesn't answer, which tells you enough. The glow spreads across the slab, the fog tightening into coils. The shadow's shape is clearer now, its edges sharp, its movements deliberate. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it flattens, slipping back into the carvings as if sinking through ice. The clearing feels lighter, but only slightly. The stranger stands, brushing moss from his hands. We have until the next waking, and that won't be long. He glances toward the path you came from. If we're lucky, we can trace the feeding before it strengthens. You want to ask what happens if you're not lucky, but you already know you wouldn't like the answer. The trek back toward the village feels shorter, though your legs ache and your boots are heavier with damp soil. It's not because the path is easier, it's because your mind won't stop replaying the moment when the shadow spoke your name. The syllables had clung to your ears like cobwebs, delicate but impossible to shake off. The stranger walks ahead in silence until you reach the first crooked birch tree that marks the edge of the deeper woods. He stops, crouches, and brushes away a patch of leaves. Beneath is a faint circle burned into the earth, no wider than a dinner plate. In the center, the soil is darker, almost oily. This is where it fed, he says, not long ago. You kneel beside it, noticing something sharp sticking up from the soil. You brush it clean and find a splintered piece of wood, smooth on one side and etched faintly with tiny crosshatch marks. From a door frame, he explains without prompting. It's not just random victims. It picks people bound to old promises, whether they kept them or not. Historians still argue whether these old promises in witch-hunting lore were metaphors for sin or actual legal oaths that villagers once made to the church or guilds. Here, the line between folklore and reality blurs like wet ink. You stand and look toward the village. It's still a ways off, but you can just see the faint curl of smoke from chimneys rising lazily into the afternoon sky. The scene feels too peaceful compared to what you've just seen. The stranger dusts off his hands and starts walking again. You're thinking it only hunts at night, he says. That's what most people think. But curses, real curses, don't need the dark. They just like it better. As you enter the outskirts, the familiar sounds return. The clank of a blacksmith's hammer, the murmur of conversation, the cry of a baby somewhere behind shuttered windows. You notice, though, that several doors are barred, even in daylight, and a handful of villagers glance quickly away when they see the stranger. He doesn't seem surprised. They know. Maybe not in words they'd say aloud, but they know something's wrong. You turn a corner and find yourselves at a small square where a wooden post rises from the center. Old scorch marks stain the ground around it. This was for witches, you say. Still is, he replies, but lately They've been using it for something else. Before you can ask, a door creaks open nearby and a woman steps out. She's middle-aged, with sharp eyes that seem to weigh and measure you in a glance. She speaks directly to the stranger. "You found it? Found where it's been," he says, "not who it's after." The woman's gaze flicks to you. "Then you better hurry. Someone's missing." Your pulse stutters. "Who?" The woman hesitates, glancing at the ground. "The Cooper's boy. Gone since last night. No sign of him." The stranger's jaw tightens. "Show me his home." You follow them through narrow lanes to a squat wooden house that smells faintly of sawdust and tar. Inside, the air is still, as though holding its breath. The Cooper sits at a table, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the empty bench across from him. "He didn't run," the stranger says, after a single sweep of the room. "It came for him here." You glance around, seeing nothing unusual, until your eyes catch the doorframe. At knee height, there's a small, almost invisible hollow where the wood has been worn smooth. You crouch, running your finger over it, and feel a faint warmth like sun-baked stone. "That's how it marks them," the stranger says. "No blood, no scratches, just a little heat to show it's claimed something." The Cooper swallows hard. "Can you get him back?" The stranger doesn't answer. Instead, he pulls out the twisted iron ring you saw earlier, holding it near the hollow. The warmth fades instantly. "That will slow it," he says, "but only if we move before nightfall." The Cooper rises. "Then go." Back outside, the stranger walks quickly, scanning the rooftops, the alleys, even the clouds, as if the curse might be watching from anywhere. You have to half jog to keep up. "Why take a child?" you ask. "They're easier to keep," he replies. "The curse doesn't need their body. It needs their name. Once it takes that, the rest follows." You shiver despite the sun. "How do we find it?" He glances at you. "We don't. We make it come to us." The plan is simple in theory, dangerous in practice. Lure the curse into the open with something it can't resist. Something or someone. It's already marked. You stop walking. "You mean me?" "You were on its tongue in the clearing," he says. "It knows you. It'll follow you. And if we're ready, we can force it to bind to something else. The problem, of course, is what happens if you're not ready." You don't immediately answer him. The idea of being used as bait doesn't exactly pair well with the thought of a peaceful night's sleep, or really, survival. You look at the stranger, waiting for him to crack a grin and admit it's a joke. He doesn't. His eyes stay steady, his tone unflinching. "You've already crossed its path," he says. "It's like stepping into a spider web. You can try to pull away, but the threads are stuck. It'll come looking. The rest of the walk takes you out of the busier parts of the village and toward the old chapel on the hill. The building's stone is weathered, the roof patched in uneven tiles. A bell hangs crookedly in the tower, and the door groans as the stranger pushes it open. Inside, the air is cool and carries the faint scent of beeswax and mildew. Wooden pews line the room in uneven rows, and faded murals stretch across the walls. Saints with elongated fingers and faces half erased by time. He leads you toward the altar, but instead of kneeling, he crouches and pushes aside a loose plank in the floor. Beneath is a small compartment containing a bundle wrapped in red cloth. He lifts it gently and sets it on the altar. "This is what we'll use," he says. unwrapping it. Inside is a crude wooden figure, roughly the shape of a person, but with its head carved as a hollow circle. A faint copper tang lingers around it. You touch the surface, smooth in some spots, splintered in others. What is it? A bind ward, he explains. Old tool from the witchfinder's kit. Historians still argue whether these were purely symbolic or if people truly believed they could contain a spirit. Some say the circle for the head was meant for slipping in a lock of hair or a drop of blood. You take a step back. So you're planning to trap it in that thing? That's the idea. But the curse won't go willingly. It has to think it's getting something better. And that's me, you say flatly. That's you. He begins arranging the chapel, moving pews to create a wide space in the center, drawing faint lines in chalk along the floor. As he works, he talks more, almost like a teacher explaining a lesson. The witch hunters used to say that curses are stubborn but not clever. They know hunger and spite, but not patience. That's why you can trick them if you move fast enough. A loose floorboard creaks under your foot, startling you. The sound echoes strangely, as if the chapel itself is listening. The stranger doesn't look up. Once it's inside the circle, it can't touch you, but you can't break the lines no matter what you hear. It will lie. It will imitate voices. It might even sound like someone you trust. You swallow. What if I do break them? Then you'll learn firsthand why no one else volunteers for this part. He finishes the last chalk mark and straightens, wiping his hands on his coat. Sun will be down in an hour. We'll light the candles then. The hour passes slowly. You sit in one of the pews, watching the slants of golden light shift across the floor, listening to the faint creak of wood settling. At one point, you think you hear the faint shuffle of feet outside, but when you glance at the door, it's still closed. When the light has faded to the dusky blue of evening, the stranger lights the candles, 12 of them, each placed at precise points along the chalk lines. Their glow throws long, shivering shadows against the walls. Stand in the center, he says. You step into the circle. The bind ward rests at your feet, its hollow head facing you like a question. The stranger steps back, remaining outside the lines. Now we wait. The waiting is the worst part, at first. You hear nothing but the faint drip of water somewhere in the chapel and the occasional rustle of wind through the bell tower. But then, almost imperceptibly, the air changes. It feels thicker, heavier, as though the chapel is filling with invisible smoke. The candle flames lean, though there's no draft. And then you hear it, your name, soft at first, like a half-forgotten dream. You try to keep your breathing steady. The stranger doesn't react, but you notice his grip on the iron ring has tightened. The voice comes again, closer this time. Come here. You don't move. It changes tone, becoming playful. I've been waiting for you. Don't you want to see what I brought? You clench your fists. Not interested, you mutter. The stranger's eyes flick to the corner of the room. You follow his gaze and see a patch of darkness that's darker than it should be, even in candlelight. It shifts, slow and deliberate, sliding along the wall toward you. Hold steady, he murmurs. The darkness reaches the circle's edge. You feel an almost magnetic pull toward it, as though the air is leaning. The voice turns pleading, then angry, then silent. And in that silence, you hear something else. A small, faint voice, like a child's. Help me, the Cooper's boy. Your instinct is to move, But you remember his warning. If you break the lines, it's over. The stranger steps forward, pressing the iron ring toward the darkness. The bind ward at your feet begins to vibrate, a low hum filling the chapel. The shadow hesitates. The hum grows louder, the candles flare, and for a moment the air smells like scorched earth. Then, with a sound like snapping twine, the shadow collapses inward, vanishing into the hollow head of the wooden figure. It's over in seconds. The candles flicker, the air lightens, and the figure lies still. The stranger exhales. We've got it, for now. The stranger doesn't touch the bind ward immediately. He just stands there, staring at it like someone might regard a caged animal, not with relief, but with wary calculation. You notice the way his shoulders remain tense, as if the danger hasn't passed. Finally, he crouches and wraps the figure back in its red cloth. Even through the layers, you can sense an odd heat radiating from it, as though the thing inside is still pressing against its prison walls. Don't think of it as gone, he says quietly. Think of it as sleeping. Bad dreams wake easily. You want to ask where he plans to take it, or what he'll do to make sure it stays bound. But his expression stops you. This is someone who spent too much time looking into darkness to be sure of anything that lives there. Instead, you follow him outside. The chapel's wooden door shuts with a dull thud, and the cool night air feels almost shockingly clean after the stale heaviness inside. The village below is scattered with candlelit windows, tiny squares of gold floating in the dark. Somewhere far away, a dog barks. He starts walking downhill, the wrapped figure cradled under his arm. You match his pace, half out of curiosity, half out of a reluctance to be alone after what just happened. Where are we going? You ask. There's an old storage crypt by the river, thick stone walls. No one goes there now. We'll leave it sealed until... His voice trails off, and he gives a small shrug. Until I think of something better. The path narrows, forcing you both single file. The stranger's steps are deliberate, but you can feel his urgency in the way he keeps glancing at the tree line, as though expecting something or someone to follow. You descend into the lower part of the village, where the cobblestones give way to damp soil. The sound of rushing water grows louder until the river comes into view, a wide black ribbon under the moon. The crypt is little more than a squat stone box, its entrance half hidden by overgrown reeds. A heavy wooden door slumps in its frame, iron hinges streaked with rust. He sets the bundle down long enough to fish a key from his coat. The lock is reluctant, grinding open with a groan that echoes into the darkness within. Inside, the air is cold and mineral. Rows of empty niches line the walls, most still bearing the faint outline of coffins long since removed. He heads for the farthest corner, where a small alcove gapes like a missing tooth. This will do, he says. You watch as he kneels, sets the bundle inside the niche, and begins layering bricks in front of it. His hands are quick, practiced. This isn't the first time he's sealed something away. When he finishes, he steps back, breathing a little harder. Stone is honest, he says. If it breaks, you know something's wrong. Wood lies, iron can rust, but stone keeps its promises. You glance at the wall, at the faint bulge of the cloth-wrapped figure behind it. And what if it tries to break the promise? He meets your eyes. Then we'll both wish it hadn't, You leave the crypt, the river's voice filling the silence between you. The door shuts and locks with a finality that makes your skin prickle. By the time you return to the main road, the village has gone to sleep. Only a few lanterns burn low, and the sound of the wind seems sharper in the absence of human voices. The stranger stops at a fork in the road. "We part here. I've got work to finish." You hesitate. "Will I see you again?" He tilts his head as if weighing the question. "If you hear my voice when you're alone, don't answer. That's how you'll know it isn't me." And with that, he turns and disappears into the dark. You walk home under the moon, every shadow suddenly deeper, every corner alive with the possibility of movement. The village seems quieter than before, too quiet, as though holding its breath. When you finally reach your door, you pause before going in. The key feels heavy in your hand. Somewhere behind you, you think you hear your name, but this time, you don't look back. You don't sleep that night. The wind claws at your shutters, making the wood groan like a restless sleeper, and every creak in the beams above feels too intentional to be just the house settling. You lie in bed with your eyes open, staring at the ceiling where moonlight pools in uneven silver patches, and you replay the sound you thought you heard at your door. The voice, your name. Maybe you imagined it. Maybe. But you remember the hunter's warning, the way he said it, not if, but when. By the time the first gray fingers of dawn reach across your floor, you've decided to do the one thing you swore you wouldn't. Go back to the crypt. The village is still asleep, except for the baker pulling his shutters open and one bleary-eyed farmer leading a pair of oxen down the lane. They nod at you, but don't ask questions. Maybe they've learned not to. The path to the river is wetter than yesterday, the soil sucking at your boots. The reeds hiss against each other in the breeze, and the crypt appears slowly from the mist, squatting low and unwelcoming. The door is still locked. You try the handle anyway, as if it might give out of pity, but the iron holds. You circle the building, brushing away the vines and moss clinging to the stone. On the far side, you find something you don't want to find. A hairline crack running from the roof line down to the base, thin but sharp, like it was carved deliberately. You crouch, pressing your ear to the wall. The cold stone leaches warmth from your skin. For a long time, there's nothing but the distant rush of the river, and then, faint, almost too faint, you hear it, a tapping, slow, measured, like knuckles rapping from the inside. You jerk back so fast you almost fall. Historians still argue whether knockings in old sealed crypts were tricks of shifting stone, the echoes of water, or something else entirely. The villagers here would probably just tell you not to go listening at walls you don't own. But you can't shake the certainty that this sound was meant for you. You step away, scanning the tree line, half expecting to see the hunter leaning there, arms crossed, ready to scold you. Instead, you see a figure in the fog, not him, taller and thinner, draped in what looks like a ragged cloak. It's turned toward you, but you can't make out a face. When you blink, the fog thickens and the figure is gone. You leave quickly, resisting the urge to run. Every step toward the village feels longer than it should, the path twisting in ways you don't remember. By the time you reach the main road, your pulse is so loud in your ears you almost miss the distant toll of the church bell. 1, 2, 3. The sound is wrong. Bells in this village only ring for Mass or for death. You're not sure which this is meant to be. By the time you get to the square, a crowd has gathered outside the chapel. The priest is pale, his lips pressed tight. You hear whispers about a woman found at the river's edge, about how her eyes were open but she didn't speak, about how her skin was cold as stone even in the morning sun. The hunter isn't here, and maybe that's worse. Someone in the crowd notices you, their gaze lingering too long. You turn away, suddenly aware of how your hands are still trembling. You slip back home and bolt the door, leaning against it until your breathing slows. On the table sits your lantern from last night, the wick charred but unlit. When you finally light it, the flame flickers violently, almost bowing toward the door as if pulled by a draft that shouldn't exist. It takes you longer than it should to realize you're not imagining the whisper. Your name again, closer this time. And then, from somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, tap, tap, tap. You don't go to the floorboards right away. Instead, you freeze in the middle of your kitchen, hands still gripping the lantern handle so tightly that the metal bites into your palm. The tapping stops, as if it knows you've noticed. The hunter's voice echoes in your head. It always starts small. The rest of the day passes in a haze. You try to keep busy, stacking wood, fetching water from the well, but every so often you catch yourself glancing down at the floor like it might shift under your feet. The village feels off today. Conversations cut short when you pass, eyes darting to the ground. The church bell hasn't rung again, but the silence feels heavier than sound. By late afternoon, you've decided to find the hunter. If something is happening under your house, you need him to tell you whether to burn it, bless it, or just abandon it. The inn is your first stop. The innkeeper, a barrel-shaped woman with arms like a blacksmith, shakes her head before you even finish asking. Haven't seen him since yesterday morning, she says. Probably out on a job. You press her for details, but she only shrugs. Hunters don't leave travel plans, they just vanish and hope to come back in one piece. That night, you don't light the lantern. Instead, you sit in the dark, listening. The first tap comes just after moonrise. Tap. You lean forward in your chair, elbows on your knees. Tap. This time, you think you hear something after the sound. A faint scrape, like nails dragging over stone. Historians still argue whether medieval homes truly had hidden cellars for safety, or whether that's just folklore exaggerated over time. But you know your home doesn't have one. At least, you thought you knew. The third tap is louder. This time, the wood beneath your feet gives the faintest vibration, and it sends an icy ripple up your spine. You kneel, pressing your ear to the floor. Nothing, just the smell of dust and old pine. Then, faint but distinct, comes the whisper. Not your name this time, but a word you don't recognize. It's low and wet, the syllables slurred together, and it makes your skin prickle in ways that feel older than fear. You bolt upright, nearly knocking over your chair. Something moves outside your window, not in the street, right up against the glass. A shadow, long and thin, sliding past so close you can see the distortion where it overlaps the moonlight. You stay still, barely breathing. The shadow stops. Then slowly, a pale shape presses against the glass. It's a hand. Long fingers splayed wide, nails too sharp to be human. And then it's gone. You grab your coat and leave the house, locking the door behind you like that will matter. Your boots crunch on the frost-slick road as you head toward the chapel. If anyone can help you, it's the priest. Or at least, he'll know how to find the hunter. The chapel is empty, except for a few candles still burning on the altar. The wax has run down in thick rivulets like melted bones. You're halfway down the aisle when you hear movement in the confessional. You pull the curtain aside. The hunter sits there, head bowed, eyes shadowed under the brim of his hat. His coat is torn, and his left sleeve is stained dark. For a moment, you think he's asleep, but then he lifts his gaze to yours. They know you heard them, he says quietly, and once they know that, he doesn't finish the sentence. Instead, he hands you something wrapped in cloth. When you open it, you find a length of chain, blackened but heavy, each link etched with markings you don't recognize. Put it under your bed, he says, and don't, no matter what, look under there for 3 nights. You start to ask why, but he's already pushing past you, moving toward the door with a limp. You watch him vanish into the cold night. When you finally return home, the lantern on your table is burning. You didn't light it. You stand in the doorway, staring at the glow. The flame dances steady. No flicker from a draft, no sputter from a dying wick. Someone or something lit it for you. You can almost feel the weight of eyes still lingering in the corners of the room, watching to see if you'll notice. Your first thought is to blow it out, but you hesitate. Maybe, just maybe, you want the light on tonight. You slide the hunter's chain out of your coat pocket, the metal cool against your palm. Up close, the markings look even stranger, half familiar, like a language you should recognize but can't quite place. One link has been bent slightly, as though it's been pried apart before. You kneel beside your bed, pushing the chain as far underneath as you can. The metal scrapes against the wood floor with a faint hiss, and you flinch at the sound. The hunter's warning loops in your head. 3 nights. Don't look. Historians still argue whether medieval protective charms were just superstition or if they worked through a placebo effect, calming the mind enough for you to sleep without the fear of shadows. Right now, you're not sure you care which it is, so long as it keeps whatever's under your floorboards from coming out. The first hour after midnight passes in thick, heavy silence. Then, right on cue, tap. You keep your eyes shut, counting your breaths. Tap. This one feels closer, like it's right beneath your ribs. You grip the blanket tighter, trying to convince yourself you're imagining the faint, rhythmic scratching that follows. Then something changes. It's not just below you anymore. It's above you. A creak in the ceiling. Another. Something moving slowly, deliberately across the rafters. The sound is soft, but purposeful, like bare feet pressing down just enough to let you know they're there. You lie perfectly still, even as the air grows cold enough to see your breath in the dim light. Your mind scrambles through the options: stay put, run, scream for help, but every one of them feels like the wrong choice. The steps stop directly above you, and then a voice. It's muffled by the ceiling, low and slow, but this time the word is in your own language. Open. You don't even twitch. The chain under the bed rattles suddenly, as though something brushed against it or recoiled from it. The sound is metallic and sharp, echoing in the room far louder than it should. The weight above you shifts, then moves away, the creaks growing fainter until they vanish entirely. You don't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the frost outside has thickened into thin sheets of ice along the windows. The hunter's words keep clawing at your thoughts. Once they know you heard them, you decide to see him again, to demand answers this time. But when you reach the chapel, the door is bolted shut from the inside. No sound, no movement, no sign he was ever there. The blacksmith tells you she saw him leave at dawn, headed toward the forest with a satchel full of stakes and salt. She says it like it's nothing unusual. You try to follow his tracks, but the wind has already erased them, the snow smoothed over like it never happened. That night, you do the only thing you can. You light your lantern, shut the door, and wait. The tapping doesn't come until much later, but when it does, it's not from under the floor, it's from the window. And it's not a tap this time, it's a knock. You freeze. The knock comes again. 3 sharp raps against the glass, each one just a little harder than the last. The window pane trembles, the thin frost trembling with it. You know better than to look, but curiosity has a way of digging its claws in deep. You inch toward the window, bare feet whispering against the floorboards, heart punching against your ribs like it's trying to escape. The hunter's warning echoes in your mind. Don't give them your eyes. Historians still argue whether the evil eye was a literal curse or just a metaphor for intimidation. In most medieval villages, avoiding someone's gaze wasn't just politeness, it was protection. And tonight, you understand why. The frost makes the glass hazy, a blessing and a curse. You can't see clearly, but you can tell something's there. A darker shape against the dark outside, unmoving, too tall for comfort. You step back, force yourself to sit on the bed. You try to pretend you didn't hear it. Knock. You flinch, but don't move. Knock. The sound seems to seep through the walls, vibrating in your bones. You pull the blanket over your head like a child, the chain's cold weight still under the bed, and whisper to yourself that it's just wind, just ice shifting, just anything but what it feels like. Then the voice comes again, this time clear, open. It's the same word you heard through the ceiling last night, but closer, too close, like it's spoken through the glass itself. Your fingers twitch toward the lantern, tempted to snuff it out, to hide in total darkness. But something deep in your gut tells you the light is the only thing keeping it on the other side of that window. You stay like that for hours, the knocks slowly fading, until the gray smear of morning seeps in from behind the frost. When you finally dare to look outside, there are no footprints in the snow. None. Just an untouched, glistening sheet leading up to your window, like nothing ever stood there at all. But in the middle of that pristine white, pressed perfectly into the ice, is a single chain link, identical to the hunter's, twisted open. You're not sure which part unsettles you more, the fact that the chain link matches the hunter's exactly, or that it's sitting there in the snow without so much as a footprint around it. You kneel by the window, breath fogging the cold glass, scanning for any disturbance. There's nothing, not even the faintest depression in the powdery surface. In medieval times, people might have called this fairy work, those unexplained patterns and objects appearing overnight. Historians still argue whether such tales were just superstition or a way to explain things that felt too dangerous to confront directly. You want to open the window, to grab the link, and tuck it away somewhere safe. But every instinct in you says, don't break the barrier. Instead, you step back, wrap yourself tighter in the blanket, and try to think like the hunter. What would he say? Probably something irritating like, chains don't lose themselves, and things that come in the night don't leave gifts without a price. You glance at the floor where the remaining chain lies under the bed. It's exactly where you left it. Only now there's a faint pattern in the dust, a curling shape, almost like a letter etched around it. The smell hits you next. It's faint, metallic, and oddly sweet, like iron left in the rain. It pulls you toward the bed until you're crouched low, fingertips brushing the chain. The moment you touch it, the metal is warm. Too warm. You hear a noise from outside, the steady crunch of snow under boots. This time, it's not the sharp, unnatural sound from the night before. This is slow, heavy, deliberate. You move to the door and ease it open. There, standing in the pale light, is the hunter. He's covered in frost, a thin crust clinging to his hood and shoulders. You didn't open it, did you? His voice is rough, almost urgent. You shake your head, and he exhales like someone who's just won a coin toss with death. Good, he mutters, because if you had, we wouldn't be talking now. Then he holds up something in his gloved hand, a second chain link, identical to the one outside your window. And he says, very quietly, "These aren't mine." You let the door fall shut behind him, sealing out the hiss of wind. The hunter stomps snow from his boots, his eyes darting toward the window as if he half expects something to be watching back. "They weren't here when I left last night," he says, shaking off his hood. "Not outside your room, not anywhere." The fire pops in the hearth, a sharp sound in the heavy silence. You glance toward the window. The link is still there, sitting like a silver coin abandoned on white velvet. In medieval folklore, a gift left on a threshold was rarely a gift at all. Sometimes it was a token of protection, a charm against sickness, perhaps. But more often, it was a claim. Historians still argue whether these tokens were real physical objects or simply symbolic stories passed through oral tradition to keep villagers obedient and wary. You cross the room, kneeling to peer closer through the glass. It's not exactly iron. The color is wrong, too pale. When the hunter drops his link onto the table, it rings faintly, not like metal on wood, but like crystal. "Where did you get that?" you ask. He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he takes off his gloves, revealing hands that are raw and red, the skin cracked from cold. He rolls the link between his palms like it's a worry stone. "I found it on the trail leading to the North Pass," he says finally. "It wasn't just lying there. It was hanging from a branch, high enough that I had to climb to get it." You blink, and you thought, what? That it belonged to you? His mouth twitches. "No, I thought it belonged to her." The pronoun hangs there between you like the smell of smoke after a fire. He explains in that slow, measured way that makes you wish he'd just spit it out. There's a figure, always seen at a distance, never close enough to touch. She wears no cloak in the snow, no boots, no scarf. She moves like the wind is pushing her forward instead of holding her back. And wherever she's spotted, strange things happen. Wolves walk beside people without harm. Children dream of voices calling them into the forest. and sometimes chains appear. You try to laugh, but it comes out brittle. You think these links came from her? I don't think. His eyes narrow. I know. The link outside the window catches the first thin slice of morning sun. It flashes so brightly that you flinch. By the time your vision clears, the link is gone. The snow where it sat is untouched. The hunter swears under his breath, grabs his link from the table, and tucks it into his coat. Pack your things. We're not waiting for her to leave us another piece. You hesitate. Where are we going? He's already pulling the door open. Somewhere she can't follow. The way he says it makes you think he isn't entirely sure such a place exists. The snow swallows your footsteps almost as soon as you make them. It's early enough that the world is still blue with the last shadows of night, but late enough that your breath no longer billows quite so thick. The hunter sets a pace that makes your legs burn, and he doesn't look back, not once. Somewhere behind you, the cabin sits quiet, a lump beneath a frosting of snow. It feels wrong to leave it, but you can't shake the image of that silver link vanishing without so much as a print in the powder. The road you take is less a road than a series of frozen impressions between skeletal trees. They arch overhead, black and brittle, their branches rattling in the wind like bones in a jar. Ever been this way before? You ask, trying to keep your voice casual. Once, he says, and the word drops like a stone. With another hunter, we didn't make it far. There's a pause long enough for you to realize he isn't going to explain unless you prod. What happened? We found a token in the path, bigger than a link, more like a collar, his name carved inside, and the next morning, he shakes his head. Let's just say it wasn't the same man walking beside me. You tell yourself it's just another campfire tale, after all. Medieval villagers were steeped in stories about cursed objects. Some were meant to warn against greed, others to explain sudden illness. But there's a strange consistency in these accounts. The cursed thing never breaks, never wears down, and always seems to want to be found. The wind shifts, bringing a smell you can't place, faint, metallic, almost sweet. You think of blood on snow, but warmer somehow, less sharp. The hunter stops so abruptly you almost collide with him. He points to the path ahead. At first, you see nothing. Then, slowly, you notice the marks. A spiral of tiny impressions, each no bigger than your thumb, pressing the snow inward without breaking its surface. The pattern loops on itself again and again, like someone has been walking in endless circle. She's close, he says. You want to ask how he knows, but your voice sticks in your throat. Instead, you notice something stranger. The center of the spiral isn't empty. There's a small mound no higher than your knee, and on it, balanced as if placed with care, is another link. This one faintly glowing, the same pale shimmer as the first. Historians still argue whether tales of will-o'-the-wisp-style lights in snowfields were just tricks of the eyes, caused by moonlight on ice, or if villagers truly believed they marked a supernatural presence. Standing here now, you can't help leaning toward the latter. The hunter doesn't move. He doesn't blink. You wonder if he's waiting for the glow to fade or for something else to happen. Then, without warning, the glow flares, bright enough to cast shadows behind the trees. The spiral of impressions starts to shift, snow collapsing in soft sighs as if something unseen is moving outward toward you. The hunter grabs your wrist, pulling you back so fast your heel catches on a root. You stumble, but he doesn't slow. The forest seems to tilt, each tree leaning in, narrowing the path ahead. When you dare glance over your shoulder, the spiral is gone, the mound is gone, the glowing link is gone. Only your own footprints remain, leading away into the white. You don't realize how far you've walked until the forest thins and a dark line appears on the horizon. The hunter stops, his breath fogging the air, and lifts a hand toward it. "There," he says. "It's a village, or what's left of one." As you draw closer, the air changes. It smells older here, like damp wood and ash, even though the snow muffles every trace of smoke. The houses are crooked, their roofs bent under years of winter weight, windows shuttered with boards gone soft at the edges. Some doors stand ajar, as if whoever lived there left in a hurry and never came back. There's a chill that isn't just from the wind. Even your skin feels watched. "You said she cursed you," you murmur to the hunter. "Does she live here?" "Not anymore," he replies, voice low. "But this place remembers her." He leads you to the center of the village, where an old stone well sits half buried in snow. The wooden frame above it has collapsed, one beam jutting at an awkward angle. The hunter kneels, brushing away frost until the stones show through, rough, blackened, and in one spot, engraved. It's a simple carving, a circle broken by a jagged line. The hunter runs his finger along it. She marked it before they drove her out. Said the village would fade as the mark faded. Took less than a year before the crops failed, the animals died, and the people followed. You've heard stories of medieval curses like this, communal punishments tied to land rather than person. Historians still argue whether such accounts were superstition layered over ordinary disasters, or whether fear itself helped hasten the ruin. A sound breaks the stillness, a faint creak, as if a door is swinging somewhere in the empty streets. The hunter rises slowly, his gaze fixed on a narrow alley between two leaning houses. From the shadow there, something steps forward. At first, it looks like a person, small, wrapped in rags. Then it tilts its head, and you see the face, or rather, you see the space where a face should be, smooth and pale like the inside of an eggshell, with a single thin line running where a mouth might be. The hunter's hand goes to his belt, but the thing doesn't move closer. It just stands, breathing in shallow, deliberate pulls, each exhale sending a fine spray of frost into the air. You can't help thinking of the stories where witches made servants from snow and bone, giving them just enough life to carry a message, or a curse. The question is, what message does this one bring? It tilts its head the other way. The mouth line twitches once. Then, so quietly you almost doubt you hear it, it whispers, "Leave." The hunter doesn't need convincing. He grabs your arm, steering you away from the well, away from the thing. You risk one last glance and see the faceless figure turning toward the stones, touching the engraved mark with a trembling hand. As you pass out of the village, you think you hear the sound of the well filling, not with water, but with something heavier, slower, like sand. And for the first time, you're not sure if the curse is still here or if it's following you. By the time you and the hunter stop, the village is just a gray smudge in the snow behind you. Your breath still comes quick, though you're not sure if it's from the cold or from what you saw or thought you saw at the well. The hunter says nothing for a while. He just keeps walking, his shoulders hunched, boots crunching on the hard crust of ice. Finally, he mutters, "That thing wasn't there before." You want to ask what he means, but the way his jaw tightens tells you he's not ready. So you let the silence grow until the sound of rushing water interrupts it. Ahead, through a stand of frost-bitten pines, is a narrow bridge of stone arched over a river so dark it swallows the moonlight. The hunter stops at the edge, looking down into the current. "This is where I first found her," he says. "The river smells metallic like iron. The water moves fast, slapping at the stone piers, and the wind seems sharper here, needling through your clothes." He points to a tangle of roots at the far bank. "She was standing there, no cloak, no shoes, just her hair frozen in strands. I thought she was lost, tried to help her across." His eyes narrow. She smiled. That's when it started. You've read about the so-called bridge encounters of the Middle Ages, stories where travelers met strangers who offered blessings or curses, depending on whether they were helped. Historians still argue whether these tales were coded warnings about bandits or echoes of older pagan rites where bridges marked crossings between worlds. "She took my hand," the hunter says, "and whispered something. I couldn't understand the words, but they felt heavy. The same night, my house burned. The bridge groans under a sudden gust, and for a moment you swear you see something move beneath the water, pale, almost human, hair trailing behind it. The current quickens, slapping harder against the stone, as if whatever's under there knows you're watching." The hunter steps forward, leaning over the edge. "Sometimes I think she lives down there now," he says. "Sometimes I dream she's still waiting for me to cross back." A thin crack splits the ice along the riverbank. The sound makes your skin crawl. You're about to suggest moving on when you hear it, a low, wet humming rising from beneath the bridge. It's not the wind, it's not the water. It's a voice. The hunter straightens, his eyes locking on yours. "She knows," he whispers. "She knows we've been to the village." And just like that, the humming stops. The river returns to its steady rush, the ice quiet again. But the air feels heavier now, as if whatever just happened hasn't gone away. It's only moved somewhere you can't see. You don't remember deciding to move, but your feet are already carrying you off the bridge, away from that low stone arch and the water hissing below it. The hunter follows without a word, his pace quickening, boots punching through the shallow crust of ice. The forest around you changes as you go. The pines, thin, giving way to leafless oaks with twisted branches that seem to grab at the pale moon. Somewhere ahead, there's a faint orange flicker. When you get closer, you see it's not a campfire. It's a lantern swinging from the hand of an old woman standing in the middle of the path. She's bundled in layers of faded wool, a scarf wrapped high over her mouth, eyes glittering in the shadows. The hunter stiffens. "Don't talk to her," he murmurs. The woman tilts her head and speaks anyway, her voice muffled but sharp. "You've crossed the bridge. That means you're marked." Your stomach sinks. You're not in the mood for cryptic forest riddles, but the way she says it, matter of fact, like she's telling you it's going to snow, makes you listen. She steps closer, holding up a bundle of something wrapped in cloth. The scent of dried herbs and something faintly metallic, blood maybe, drifts out. "Take it," she says. "You won't sleep without it." The hunter shakes his head, but you notice his hand twitch like he's tempted. Historically, Traveling charm sellers like her weren't rare. In rural Europe, women who peddled protective amulets and remedies often walked the fine line between healer and witch in the public eye. Historians still argue whether these women genuinely believed in their craft or if they simply knew fear was the best currency in desperate times. The bundle is warm when you take it and heavier than you expect. Inside is a small glass vial filled with dark liquid, a sprig of rosemary, and something that looks disturbingly like a human tooth. She'll be watching, the woman warns. When she comes, you'll want this between you. You start to ask what exactly you're supposed to do with it, but she's already stepping back, lantern swaying. The light fades between the trees until there's only darkness where she stood. The hunter exhales slowly. She's not wrong, he mutters, about the watching. The words hang there, damp and heavy. The forest feels tighter now, the wind threading through the branches with a low hiss. You look down at the bundle in your hands, trying to decide if you're relieved to have it, or more afraid than before. The hunter keeps his eyes on the path ahead, shoulders tense. You tuck the bundle into your coat pocket, its odd warmth pressing against your side like a secret you're not sure you want to keep. The trail dips, and you find yourself moving into a shallow hollow where the wind dies and the silence thickens. The only sound is the crunch of your boots in the thin frost, each step too loud in the still air. Then, faint at first, comes a whisper. It's not the wind, it's rhythmic, almost like someone chanting far off. You glance at the hunter. Do you hear that? He nods once, grimly. That's her. In folklore, witches were often said to be heard before they were seen, singing, chanting, or even laughing in the night. One 15th century pamphlet claimed that hearing such sounds meant your soul was already being tugged from your body, like a fish on a line. Historians still argue whether these accounts were based on genuine encounters or were clever tools to keep communities in line through fear. The chant grows louder, threading between the trees. It's in no language you know, but your skin prickles with the sense that you understand enough to be uneasy. The hunter halts suddenly. We can't go forward, he says, scanning the shadows. She's on the move. Something shifts at the edge of your vision, a flicker of pale cloth, gone before you can turn your head. Then another, on the opposite side. Your pulse jumps. She's circling. The hunter pulls a length of chalk from his coat and kneels, sketching a rough circle on the frozen ground around you both. The chalk squeaks against the ice, the sound too bright in the dark. You step out of this, and you're hers, he says. You stand inside the crude white ring, heart pounding. The chanting stops. The silence that follows is somehow worse. A breath, warm, damp, ghosts across the back of your neck. You spin, but nothing is there. The hunter closes his eyes, lips moving in a whisper of his own. Something like a prayer, but sharper, quicker. Then, from the tree line, a figure emerges. She's taller than you expect. Her hair a wild snarl of black shot through with silver. Her dress hangs in tatters, but her eyes, cold, gray, unblinking, are fixed on you. She steps closer, slow and deliberate, like she's savoring the moment. Your hand goes instinctively to the bundle in your pocket, the one the lantern woman gave you. The hunter's voice is barely a breath. Now would be the time. Your fingers fumble inside your coat pocket, closing around the bundle. The cloth feels damp now, though it hadn't when the lantern woman pressed it into your hands. The witch stops a few paces from the chalk circle, tilting her head like she's studying a rare insect. "Hunter," she says in a voice so soft you feel it more in your bones than your ears. "Still running errands for the church?" The hunter doesn't answer, just keeps one hand on the hilt of his knife. In real medieval trials, there are recorded moments where accused witches spoke directly to their accusers in court, sometimes mocking them, sometimes calmly offering prophecies. One woman in Würzburg was said to have told her judge the exact date of his death, which, according to the scribe's notes, came true within a month. Historians still argue whether these were later embellishments or evidence that fear itself could manifest strange coincidences. The witch's gaze slides to you, and you. Her smile is small, but it's there. You don't belong here. You pull the bundle out. The cloth unfolds in your hands to reveal a small, smooth stone, the color of old bone. Its surface is etched with swirling marks you can't quite follow. Every time your eyes trace them, they seem to change. The witch's smile falters. "Where did you get that?" You glance at the hunter, but he looks as startled as you feel. "She gave it to me," you say. The witch takes a slow breath, her eyes narrowing. "Of course she did." The wind stirs suddenly, lifting strands of her hair. It smells faintly of burnt sage and damp earth. The hunter hisses at you. "Drop it into the snow, now." But your fingers won't open. The stone feels fused to your skin. The more you try to let go, the heavier it seems, as if it's pulling you forward. The witch takes a single step closer, and the chalk at her feet darkens, curling into thin black smoke. You don't even know what you're holding, do you? The hunter pulls you back by your coat collar. "Don't listen. He doesn't finish. The forest itself seems to lean in, every tree creaking softly. Shadows stretch unnaturally long. You hear that same whispering chant again, but this time it's coming from inside your own head. The witch's eyes fix on the stone. "Give it to me, and I'll let you leave." It's tempting, more than it should be. Your grip tightens. Somewhere in the haze of her voice, you feel the faintest hum running through your bones, as if the stone is part of you now. The hunter draws his knife and slashes at the air between you, muttering something in Latin. Sparks, tiny and golden, flicker where the blade passes, and for a moment the pressure in your mind eases. "Move!" he orders, grabbing your arm. But as he pulls, the witch's hand shoots forward, not touching you, just brushing the air, and the stone grows hot in your palm. You gasp. Somewhere behind her, deeper in the forest, another voice answers hers. The answering voice is lower, rougher, like the crack of old timber breaking under snow. It rolls through the trees, making the frost on the branches shiver. The hunter freezes, knife still raised, eyes darting past the witch's shoulder. She doesn't turn. She doesn't need to. "He's here," she murmurs. In historical accounts of witch hunts, there are scattered mentions of accomplices who never appeared at trials. Names whispered in testimony, but no bodies ever brought in. Some chroniclers suggested they were just inventions under torture, but others hinted they were something less human. Historians still argue whether these figures were coded references to political enemies or a way to speak of spirits without saying the word outright. The forest parts just enough for a shape to emerge, taller than any man you've seen, draped in something that could be animal hide or something much older. Antlers curled from its head, glistening with frost. Its face is shadow, except for two eyes that burn faintly red, like coals buried under ash. The hunter swears under his breath and pushes you back. Don't let them touch you. The witch's voice lilts with a strange warmth now, almost as if she's welcoming an old friend. You've kept your distance for too long. The antlered figure steps closer, the snow crunching softly beneath its weight. With each movement, the whispers in your head grow louder, layered, like dozens of voices speaking over each other in a language that tugs at something deep in your memory. The stone in your hand pulses. It matches the rhythm of the figure's footsteps. You realize with a chill that you can sense its heartbeat. Or maybe it's sensing yours. "Hunter," the witch says lightly, "this is no longer your hunt." He ignores her, shifting his stance, knife ready. His voice is low but fierce. "Whatever bargain you two have, it ends tonight." The figure finally stops beside the witch, towering over her, and then its gaze lands on you. It tilts its head just slightly, as if studying whether you're prey or something else entirely. "You brought the key," it says, though its mouth never moves. Your pulse hammers in your ears. "Key to what?" The witch's smile returns, but it's sharper now. "To open what was never meant to be closed." The air thickens, heavy enough that breathing feels like trying to inhale water. Somewhere beneath your feet, you hear a faint grinding. Stone on stone, far below the snow. The hunter grabs your wrist, trying to pry the stone away. "Drop it, now!" But the moment his skin touches yours, there's a blinding flash, white, cold, and impossibly loud. You stumble backward, blinking away the afterimage, and find yourself standing alone in the circle. The hunter is gone. The witch and the antlered figure are gone. Only the stone remains in your hand, still warm, still humming. And from the dark tree line, the voice of the antlered thing drifts to you once more. You've already chosen. Snow begins to fall again, but slower now, each flake catching the dim light and spinning lazily down, as if the forest has paused to watch what you'll do next. The silence is thick enough to hear your own breathing, and somewhere beneath it, the stone's faint hum persists, a steady heartbeat that no longer feels entirely separate from your own. You take a step toward the tree line, your boots sinking into snow that seems deeper than before. The branches overhead creak, shedding powder in gentle sighs. No hunter's footprints mark the path behind you. His trail has vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. You think about the real history of curses, how in the late medieval period, curse often referred not just to a spell, but to a formal declaration of damnation, sometimes sanctioned by the church. A bishop's curse could be as feared as any whispered hex, because it meant exile from community, from the markets, from life itself. Historians still argue whether belief in supernatural curses was more dangerous than the real-world power of institutional ones. Out here in the cold, it feels like both might be true. The whispering returns, faint but insistent, curling in the edges of your hearing. It's not the language you know, but the intent is clear. Walk forward. You can't tell if the voice is the witches, the antlered figures, or the forest itself. You pass into the shadow of the trees, and the world narrows to the space between trunks. It's darker here, but not entirely. Bioluminescent moss glows faint green on the bark, and when you glance down, you see the snow is gone, replaced by a thin carpet of black leaves. A small flat stone lies in the path ahead, etched with the same spiral as the one in your palm. When you step over it, the air changes, warmer, thicker, as if you've stepped into the breath of something enormous. And then ahead, you see it, a low mound of earth, ringed with standing stones half buried in the ground. Between them, a faint light spills upward like moonlight trapped under the soil. The hum in your stone intensifies, almost painfully. You kneel, press it to the center of the mound, and feel the ground tremble. A seam splits open in the earth, slow but steady, revealing stairs leading downward into darkness. From below, the scent of damp stone and something faintly metallic rises, along with the memory of that deep, layered voice. You've already chosen. You hesitate only a moment, then you descend. The steps are narrow and uneven, slick with moisture. Your hand grazes the wall for balance, and the rock feels warm to the touch. The deeper you go, the louder the whispers become, until you can almost make out words, questions, names, promises. Finally, you reach a chamber. At its center stands the witch, her cloak pooling at her feet like spilled ink, and beside her, the antlered figure. Their eyes turn toward you at the same time, and in the same voice, they speak. Welcome to the hollow court. Behind them, something stirs in the darkness, a vast, coiled shape, the size of which you can't comprehend. The air smells older than history. You realize now that whatever hunt began above ground hasn't ended at all. It's only changed hands. The witch tilts her head, smiling as though you've arrived precisely when expected. You understand what you carry now, don't you? Your fingers tighten around the stone. You nod, though you're not sure why. The chamber's walls begin to shift, stones sliding into new patterns, sealing the way you came. And as the whispers swell into a single, resonant chord, you understand the truth of it. The curse was never theirs. It was always yours. The air down here is warmer, but not comforting. More like the breath of a closed room after too many candles have burned low. Your heartbeat slows, not from calm, but from the heavy stillness that now surrounds you. You notice the witch is no longer watching you directly. Neither is the antlered figure. Their attention is fixed on the coiled presence in the shadows, as though you've already played your part. And now the story moves on without you. A faint sound, water dripping, echoes through the chamber. It's steady, almost hypnotic, each drop falling into some unseen pool. You find yourself focusing on it, letting it pull your thoughts away from the weight of the stone in your hand. If you close your eyes, you can almost imagine you're somewhere else entirely. Perhaps back above ground, lying on snow under a moonlit sky, the cold biting just enough to remind you you're alive. The forest would be quiet again, just wind in the branches, no voices, no choices pressing against your mind. But when you open your eyes, the chamber is still here, and so are they. The witch's breathing is slow and even, as if she's been waiting centuries for this moment. The antlered figure stands motionless, its eyes now dim embers. Whatever happens next will happen in silence. You take one long breath, then another, The stone no longer hums. Somewhere far above, snow falls on an empty clearing. End of script. Sweet dreams.